Okay. Dave, can you hear us online?
Yes, sir.
Great,
Yes.
thank you.
Yep.
Perfect, thank you. So, Seth, I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. Recording is going, so.
All right, welcome everybody to the adaptive management. Okay, so we need to do roll call
Yeah,
real quick. You wanna roll through everyone there, Terry?
sure. Seth Barnes,
Here in person.
Dave Budney,
Present by video.
Adam Copel, president in person. Stacy Detweiler,
Present in person.
Julie Furman,
Present in person.
Wendy Gerlach,
Present in person.
Kim Kratz. Oh, no, he's not. Looks like we might have
It's
Kate Wells.
it's Kate Wells for NIMS on video.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
And-
I'll be replacing Kim for the duration.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. Casey Kullock,
Present in the room.
Jason Robison. And Jason let me know earlier today he was going to join by phone because he was traveling. So hopefully he will join. Josh Seeds, present in person. Amanda Sullivan Astor,
Present in person.
William.
Present in person.
Okay. Next. So for today, there's the usual beginning stuff. Talk about the amphibians research questions package, East Oregon steep slopes scoping proposal. And that's mostly focused on answering the questions from the IRST, the AMPC charter, and then effectiveness monitoring. Any questions there? Shake his head. Okay. And then just the usual, these are recorded instead of minutes, but we do the meeting summaries. And if you're online, if you could mute yourself except for when talking, but it's good to have you on the camera so we can see and everything like that. Next slide. So is there public comment? Not hearing any or seeing any hands raised. Let's go on to the next. And the executive summary of the previous meeting, if folks had a chance to look at that. It's just,
So Terry, I did, and I have a comment. We don't show it in the meeting summary for March, but we did actually accept the February's meetings. And I think we should note that we accepted with modification or accepted as it is.
yes,
So
that makes sense.
It needs to at least reflect that we've done something there. So if you wouldn't mind noting that we accepted the February meeting summary. If so, then I would accept the March, we accept the March meeting summary.
Great, I'll make that change.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, makes sense.
And we've just looked for consensus before. It's not a.
Right.
Yeah.
Anybody have any comments or suggested edits to those notes?
Thank you for me.
Yeah, good point. Okay. So updates. So first of all, Jacob unfortunately is moving on to, well, his whole unit is moving on. And so thank you for all your years of helping us out. Get food on the table. Logistics that are helpful that you don't necessarily see other than food, but he's been helping out a lot like that. And Marta is going to be stepping in to replace Jake. So welcome, Marta. Thank you for coming to support us. And she will provide excellent service, I'm sure, like Jacob.
Thank you, Terry.
Yep.
Thank you.
Jacob, what does it mean when your whole unit is moving on? It sounds like this slightly. And
Yeah, it's not.
since I live in a world where ominous things are ominous. Yes, ominous sounding things are ominous.
Yeah, so the federal grant support unit is the unit that I work in. And we were under forest resources for, gosh, a long time.
Yeah.
But I think they just wanted the grants department to be closer to the finance department. Money working, money. So they just kind of wanted us to be closer to them. Here, as a matter of fact, my office is upstairs, so I will be, I'm not gonna go away forever. Like if there's a meeting, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna say. So, I'm not gone for forever, but if there's time where I'm busy. Yes.
Yes, thank you, helping us.
You're welcome, and I appreciate everyone and everyone's patience with everything, the lunches, the notes, and the logistics, and the cameras. So we appreciate you. Everybody be patient with us. So, thank you.
Thanks for clarification. Not mean that to be honest.
Especially once you said federal. I was
I
like,
know.
wow.
Great.
Yeah.
It's good to know you're still around.
All right, so participation grant amendments. So the participation grant agreements that we have in place end on June 30th of this calendar year. We're going to extend the grant agreements. I'm not exactly sure, 2-ish plus years. So be on the lookout for a grant amendment, and that'll literally be a one sentence. The new deadline or the new expiration date is 2027, something like that. So unfortunately, we still don't know our financial situation in terms of how much they will be. We're pretty sure there's going to be money for them and probably plenty, whatever plenty is, but that's both a legislative decision and then some decisions outside of, way above my pay grade. So just for folks to know, those grant amendments are going to be coming.
So maybe with that, and we hadn't talked about this, but it might be worth updating everybody on where we're at. with
Sure.
funding, for this program.
It's probably.
Yeah, well, Stacy and I have been kind of pairing up to ring the bell, whatever, jingle the cup, whatever you want to say, hand out the hat, at the legislature. But so right now, this program is not funded by the governor's recommended budget. And I don't think that, in fact, I know if you ask the governor's office, they won't tell you that's because they don't want the program, or they don't appreciate the work, or they don't think it's important. The reality is, I think it's somewhat of a misunderstanding of what we need for this program to move forward. They intended on trying to fund it, in a limited budget. Frankly, it's always a limited budget because there's always tons of stuff to spend money on. But whatever, in a time when they couldn't find money for this program because they have other things they're trying to fund, they were trying to keep the wheels on the bus and just to do what they needed to do at minimum to be able to achieve the HCP. And that's the conversations we've had with the governor's office, and I think that's fair characterization. And they saw that we had money left over from the last biennium, and that we were going to be able to hold on to that money. And so they thought that we could move forward with that money in that capacity. So we've since been on a campaign to educate legislators. We've been in front of the Ways and Means Committee a couple of times now, talking ODF and W budget, because their 20 million for the mitigation grant program is also part of that, as is the SFISH program for money for the small forest landowners to improve their fish passage. And for this program, 6 million was what was envisioned by the authors for this program. And right now that's 0. And what we've been educating legislators on, so we've had 2 hearings at the ODF and or at the Ways and Means Committee subcommittee. We've had multiple conversations with multiple Ways and Means Committee members, both from the House and Senate, both Stacy and I directly, and then as well as and Casey also, and our respective lobby teams that are working in that building. And then we've also, right now, the Ways and Means subcommittee, or Ways and Means Committee has their road show, which they're going around Oregon, and we've had some representation there, making sure that gets brought up in those public forums as well, so that they hear it from that venue as well. And we've got another meeting. So far, we're seeing progress in the conversation. And I think that at least the co-chair we've primarily been working with there, Representative Levy, seems to be tracking pretty well, and understanding is, I think, higher now that while we do have that 3 million, that 3 million is largely allocated to projects that we've already been discussing, which we'll talk about some of those projects today and meetings. And that additional funds are funds that are needed to keep the wheels on the bus for the committee, both for participation grants as well as additional funds for more research that will be needed as the program unfolds, with effectiveness monitoring and all of those sorts of things. And so we won't know, as all of you are aware that deal with state budgets, until the end. That's when the state budget actually comes together, which is right towards the end of session. And so we'll know at that time. But I think there's good signs of progress. We've got a hearing set up with the Joint Subcommittee on Ways and Means next week, just to hear this topic. PFA, adaptive management is one of those 3 components that we'll be talking about in there. If there's anything more you would add.
I think so. I think you covered it. There's the 3 million from the last funding that we didn't expend fully because we weren't set up. IRST wasn't set up. We haven't sent our research questions yet. So there's, like, to your point, that money is essentially accounted for because it will be going to this research. We just weren't quite there yet. And then trying to get the funding for the 25-57 biennium is looking out into the next. So that's just detail around what that money is going to, which is largely the research and the small, not for the participation grants.
That said, it remains to be seen how much of that $6 million and we will get. It's, so we'll see. See where we're at there, but okay. Anyway, sorry, I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
Thanks, that was helpful. And for the record, it looks like Jason Robeson has joined us. Jason, if you can just say hello, that'd be good to have that confirmation.
Yep, I'm on. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, a few other quick updates. So at the next meeting, which is the next AMPC meeting, which is June 2nd, the IRST co-chairs will be at the meeting, at least the first half hour to an hour, to answer questions you folks might have that pertain to their scoping proposals. Since that's going to be sort of the meeting where you draft the research agenda. We'll finalize it that day because of lack of funding, lack of knowing exactly what the funding is going to be. So just putting that on your radar. We're also setting up a joint meeting with the IRST tentatively for September. We hope to have that nailed down by the end of this month. Great conversation for setting that up. And then just an FYI, I sent out invites for both the October field trip at the end of October and then the year-end meeting in December. So those are the updates. Any questions or comments about any of that?
I can't remember, did we have proposed dates for the September meeting with IRST?
No, we're going to be working on
Oh,
that.
okay.
Yeah, the AMPC and the co-chairs of the AMPC and the co-chairs of the IRST are going to meet in a few weeks and iron that out.
Okay, perfect. Can you get the slides bigger on this?
Sure.
Specific.
Yeah, I was like, found that. I know, I just don't have to keep myself. That's my bad.
Well, and
It's good to see Jason's name, but.
well, I find it helpful to see David's.
Yeah.
Yes, I know, yeah.
Anyhow, okay, next. So then for the June 2nd meeting, draft agenda is doing this first draft of the research agenda, responding to IRST feedback on amphibians questions 1 and 2. That's assuming that you folks move that package to them at the end of today's meeting. And then also talking about moving forward amphibians packets on the sub-questions that you haven't agreed to yet. So of course, this is a draft agenda. Go to the next slide. And then this is the timeline that we've shown before and discussed. And the big thing is this rectangle almost in the middle. It says AMPC Final Revised Research Agenda. That's at your July 7th meeting. So just making sure that folks are aware of that to meet the July 15th deadline to send that on to the board. And then there's a very slight chance, I mean, there's a chance the IRST could complete a scope proposal on the amphibians questions that could be included in that. But that's a pretty tight timeline, but it's a possibility. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's go ahead and, if you could pull up that document. So what Emily is pulling out is the document I sent out that compiled all the feedback on the amphibians question package. And, you know, some of it is, well, I guess I'll hand it over to you, Seth, and let me know how best to play into this conversation.
Are you pulling it up right?
Yeah, she's working
Yeah, it
on it.
just takes a moment.
Maybe put it on
Yeah, let's get rid of this.
simple
Yeah.
market.
So, sorry, I just checked with Seth and he could just give a little quick
Yeah.
preface to my comments, because in rereading the intro that we've been using, that standard template, I'm totally fine with that. I just wanted, as an exercise, to see if there's a way. Now we've gone through a few of these, we know a little bit more, there might be a way to better sort of streamline and articulate what we really want, what we're looking for, timeline. So that's why there's a lot of redlining in that first part of the letter. Just to reiterate, I am fine with how it was before. I don't think there were substantive edits on it, but I just wanted to take the time and share this with you all, because I think ideally we can kind of keep refining this as we get more questions from the IRST, but
Sure.
reveal like, oh, that maybe could have been more clear, or this is confusing.
Sure.
So that was the intention. I don't want us to spend a lot of time wordsmithing. So if everyone's like, it's too much work to kind of go through this, let's just stick with what we've got, I'm totally fine with that. But I just wanted to share it in case folks had had a chance to look at it and thought that that sort of was a more updated version that made sense. But
I'm just looking to pull mine up from here because it's kind of hard to see. It's so small.
Speaking of small.
And
I know.
part of this is where we
Sorry, she did like click over it.
we switched to Teams. We've been forced to switch to Teams
So it's kind of,
instead of Zoom. So there's also a little adjustment on our end of switching platforms.
I can do it without the comments for now. But I don't know if we want to have those up or not. That might help with making it bigger for you guys.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the like chair, Stacy, chair, co-chair, members of the committee. You took the time to write this out. I've proposed it. I've read it. I think it's valuable to have these kind of updates, like, oh, here's what we've done, here's what we're trying to say. Would you like us to just accept that? Given that it's not like we're proposing to tax liberties. This is just an opening to help undercover folks on our understand.
That would be my proposal, but I also don't know if I had a chance to look at it. This is new from the edits that Mary circulated, so. If folks don't feel comfortable for this time, that's fine, but I think that's either stick with what we've got or there's agreement that folks like this new version.
And then move it over to Switzerland.
Yes, I don't think we should wordsmith this.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, well, maybe we should give it a few minutes, but I'm comfortable with it. I appreciate you taking the time. There's still a lot of better things to think about.
Should we give a minute or two? What are people's preferences? Do you wanna take a second to read through it? And then get feedback in real time? Okay, let's do that. Everybody take a minute to make sure you've reviewed it and you're good with it. And then we'll or
I'm ready to accept the Detweiler proposal.
we've got a motion, a second. Anybody
Oh, yeah, do we need to?
need,
I have missed something, so. if I-
It's okay.
I just have some wording choices, maybe for one. Since we're talking about research questions, this should be possible to address these research, be a researcher and or monitoring. Should we say to be answered? Yeah. There's just some like grammar stuff. in
Yeah,
there.
that was a sentence from the previous.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure how to like rewrite that one, frankly.
Yeah.
So, you have-
Well, and I'm just looking at the simple changes. I don't know. I can't tell what you changed, what you didn't change. So I'm just reading it. Yeah. Could I change it to answer?
I don't know, you can address a question.
Yeah, I mean, address is fine, but it seems like it should be possible to be addressed. Or just to address.
Yeah, that's a clunky.
Should be possible to.
It's a
address.
British side of you coming out.
I didn't know this really was it.
Hey, sorry. Great.
I was unsure how to capture what it was trying to say in another way.
Wendy,
Oh, I was thinking we just say these finalized research questions should be capable of being addressed via research and or monitoring. But that,
Yeah.
that
That makes more sense.
good. Anybody have any heartburn with that? Okay. Did you have another suggested?
No, not at this point, but I haven't been. I think it's just.
Anyone else? Online, Dave's shaking his head. Oh, Amanda's.
Yeah, I guess I just have one question, and I think we kind of keep going back and forth on this. It still seems like the wording is a little bit unclear around the scoping proposals and whether it's per question or per group of questions. If it's per, has both of those, the questions and the proposals has the
Well, I think,
yes.
and I think the intent was to leave some flexibility. Because there may be more than one question or not, so this is a template.
Mhm.
And also for the IRST to say, we want to do one scope and proposal, or we want to do multiple,
Mhm.
kind of what allows for some flexibility, I think is the idea.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's fine. I just know that it's caused confusion for them and us in the past, so if we're
Yeah.
re-talking about it, if we're finding the way that it is, then that's good, but.
Well, I could add something just saying, to clarify that.
Or maybe we leave it the way it is right here and we flag it for a discussion in the future with
Yeah.
them when we meet together with them.
If they don't feel like they need more clarity, then it's, but if they still feel confused about it or conflicted, then.
I struggled with that one as well.
Yeah.
That was my effort try to simplify and capture what Terry just said, that it gives them the flexibility if they want to do just one proposal with multiple questions and sub-questions or breaks out.
I was thinking about like, if we all get that, but if a totally new group of people was here on both, in both places, would they understand?
Yeah, that's fair.
Otherwise, I
Otherwise, it looks all right. All right, we have a motion and a second. We have some amended language here. Assuming your motion would include the amended language. Thumbs up. All right, and then this doesn't have to be a significant decision because this is just part of it, but if we're good with this, let's move forward. Thank you for doing that rewrite. Stacy, take some time there. I think it is improved. Okay.
It's really nice. So all this we just get deleted. The original version of what Stacy.
Yep, okay, so that moves us down to the preliminary research questions.
So that, just for clarity, what's currently question 1 and question 2, you folks approved the last meeting. And then there is a little bit of sort of in the preamble, I think is when we get some suggested edits there. I made a note of and added, and then there's some new questions that Stacy added as well.
Stacy, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder, Terry. And 3, 1 and 2, you recall, we voted to move forward into a question package. But I think left a little bit open in this meeting, a discussion of is that, what is the complete final package that we're moving forward? So I did want to raise, because I think we had some really good conversation last meeting around question 3 and I forget how many sub questions there were, but there were at least 5 or 6 that were great, that were put together by the working group. And just for, speaking for myself and going back and looking at the PFA report and language around focusing particularly on steep slopes and riparian rules and prioritizing torrent salamanders, I tried to pull a subset of those question 3 questions that relate to those 2 pieces, the riparian and the unstable slope protections. So that was my effort. I wanted to raise it and have a little more conversation around question 3, because I think there was some agreement or interest in recognizing question 3 was valuable. What is there, what's the best path for that to move forward? Do we include them as draft questions? Tega IRST, we're looking at these in the future. Do we kick them to effectiveness monitoring? Or kind of what I'm proposing here is that we discuss a modified question 3 that includes the focus on steep slopes and riparian rules. Does that make sense? Because the context for that. It's a narrow version of 3 that had been developed by the work group and I think reflects, from my perspective, the intent of the PFA report direction.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Stacy. Thanks for taking the time to narrow it down, but still get into the stated goals of the PFA final report, which remind me you wrote, right?
All by yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, no, you were 1 of 2. How about that? That's what I hear. I think that this is helpful to me at least, because I had really like this nagging, I feel like we need to have this in the package. And I think coupling that with some comments that I think it looks like Terry brought from Wendy's comments. I think it's a longer but more complete research proposal, research question.
Yeah, to explain my comments a bit, since the
Yeah,
prior
thank
draft
you.
didn't have the questions from three, I was kind of concerned, like, where they had gone, and just wanted to highlight that that I think it's a good idea to attach them, but if we weren't, we should at least tell IRSD what we were up to, so that was sort of the gist of my questions, which if we include three, like, if we take out some of the text that you pulled over for me.
Yeah, that's not. I was like, come on, biologist.
I know.
Go ahead, Julie.
I mentioned that the last meeting too, but I also would feel more comfortable if the questions under three were included, so.
Yeah, my only concern here is that this is such a huge, I mean, this is like, I don't know. The researchers that I've talked to about our initial questions, this is decades of research and millions of dollars that we're, if we bite off all of this right now. So the question I think we're going to get back from them is, okay, so what's your priority?
Mhm.
Because this is like everything. Right? So I'm fine. It's just gonna, this isn't the sort of thing, A, that they're gonna turn around quickly and come up with a scoping proposal. So your little arrow, not gonna happen. And then B, I think we're gonna be back here around this table, which is, maybe that's fine. It just forces the conversation again, like which is ultimately gonna happen, right? Where it's gonna be, okay, what do you want bitten off first, and what sequence should this happen? Yeah, go ahead, Stacy.
With this, I mean, this is, I don't know the answer. Is this a case where IRST could do separate scoping proposals for 1 and 2, 3? I mean, I completely agree with your points that I don't see that it would be possible for them to turn that around, and for us to really evaluate and hit that July deadline. So if that is a risk, certainly want to talk through that more. I guess I'm just curious if, we could still make progress on 1 and 2, and IRST can move those forward. I don't know. I mean, do we have an answer to that?
Like how quickly IRC could turn it around?
Well, could they bring back to us the scoping proposal for question 1, for example? Or would it have to be? all
Basically,
three?
could you fast track one,
Yeah.
get these ones on moving forward, but not recognizing that there's gonna be a lot more to it.
I mean, I think from a rules perspective, that's doable. I would just try and clarify that in that letter that we just
Mhm.
approved. Hey, if there's a way to say it more elegantly, but if there's a way to divvy this up and maybe just send one proposal, scope of proposal ASAP, hopefully by July, mid-June. That would be it.
And in essence, that was kind of my original suggestion with question 3. I like your question 3 better because it is more specific. In some ways, so that's helpful. But my original thought was we would move 1 and 2 forward, and we would keep 3 as like a roadmap of sorts for them to see sort of, this is where we're heading with this, which is almost a similar vein here. It's not really a roadmap, it's an actual, you're actually moving it forward in some ways, which is probably better. So I'm not opposed to it. I would want to see us move, if we could move 1 and 2 together or in a quicker fashion. I think that would be useful. I saw Josh, and then I think Josh first and then Casey, but I don't know, maybe it was Casey.
I don't know, there's a,
Wendy was up there too.
yeah.
And then Terry and Wendy, everybody. Well, self-select for who you saw first then. Josh, go ahead. I saw you. Ping pong now.
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts, which is one, we could just, let the IRST tell us no, or yes, but, we can do this, but it's gonna take a while, or kind of along with that, I think we could, in what we send them, we could do that prioritization, say we want to see one, or to just 1 and 2 as soon as possible. Question 3 ones, which I think are quite good. Could be kind of second. 2, and so we could do that prioritization in the letter. And if it's too much for them, we can trust if we're asking for too much, and usually the time, it's the IRS to tell us that, this is just the start of back and forth, basically. But I'd like to move forward with all 3, but I would suggest we include language in the letter that says 1 and 2 come first, and comes second.
Okay, Wendy?
Yeah, I think it'll be in we have a little bit of effectiveness monitoring. I don't want to hold off on some of my comments until I hear.
Okay, go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, my thought is that there's certainly an aspect of feasibility here, and I like the idea of including question 3, the subparts, because I think gives the IRSD a sense of the broader scope we're looking for. And also, I think in terms of assessing what's feasible and what can be done, the IRSD is better equipped than we are to do that. So I kind of like the idea of sending it to them, and they could say, these things can be done initially, this would be hard to do in 50 years, this can be done in a shorter term. They're more knowledge.
Terry?
Just to speak, what I've heard from IRST is whenever something says, what's the effectiveness of rules? They don't want to be the ones to figure out which, they're like, we have no idea which rules we need. So in this sort of a diversion of how does the AMC want to handle delineating what the rules are, there's a number of ways. We don't need to enter into that conversation now, but just noting that the IRST has clearly said, we don't want to be handed, what happened with the roads, they were handed what's effective rules. They said ODF, and I worked with the ODF experts to bring that to them on what the relevant rules were for hydrologic disconnection. And that's okay if the AMPC is okay with that as a process. I just want it to be a conscious choice by the AMPC about how the AMPC delegates that, or, there's different ways of doing that. So that's a whole nother conversation, unfortunately, yet is relevant to this particular topic.
Can I ask for a clarification about what you just said?
Sure.
So are you saying that things like question 3.1 aren't specific enough for the
Correct.
IRST? Okay.
Yeah. How do rules, which rules?
Yeah.
Well, it says which rules. I mean, I'm sorry, just to put a,
It doesn't, that's not specific enough.
and I did want to say, yeah,
Because there's ultimately,
Yeah.
if you think about the the paragraphs or whatever of rules, all of them, or a focused subset. So there's
yeah,
quite
I
a
mean,
bit
I have it
there.
right in front of me. I just want to clarify that suggests, your statement suggested that there wasn't a clause right after that. It says no harvest RMAs. Like, I can pull it up right now and have the rules in
I
front of
know,
me.
but do you want all east and west, all stream sizes,
Smalls,
all-
larges.
smalls, larges, I mean, the whole thing? Or, and again, that's a question of prioritization and that's however you answer it is up to you folks, but there should be specificity that everything or a subset.
Yeah. Right. And that in and of itself is, that will determine what kind of research you do.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you need to stratify on small forest landowner property for the number that shows option A versus option B, large landowner property that has this, east side, west side, all that stuff is going to create sample sizes that are much different than if you hone in on one subset of those, right? And that goes into the cost and everything else. So I appreciate the question. I think as written right now, to Casey's point, it is yes, and yes, right? I mean, it's all of it, which is just bigger. So that then, I mean, we could have a discussion here, whether that's actually what we want to know, or whether we think it's a bigger priority to look at a subset of those, right? That's one way to hone down what we're actually asking, or we can just say yes, yes to all of it. So I think that's what you're getting at, and I think that it could be useful, once we do have that, then I would imagine ODF has staff that could easily pull those
Oh, yeah.
references and include those as like an appendix or something
Yeah.
for the IRSD. Amanda?
Terry said most of what I was going to say, unbeknownst to him or me, but I agree. I still think it's too unspecific. I think the way that forestry works is complex and no place is the same. And so the more loose we are in how we frame the question and what we're trying to get at, I do think it's harder to get to the information we're trying to find, especially since we're asking them about habitat and the previous questions are trying to figure out what that is. And so we can't even get specific on the habitat because we haven't done the research to look at where they are and where they're going in their life. So all that is to say, it's been my opinion, and I think it's still my opinion, that we move this to effectiveness monitoring and that we need to really frame out what effectiveness monitoring is in order for us to be very thoughtful, methodical, and consistent whenever we're asking IRST to look at how rules, whether that's large quantities of rules or specific subsets, are affecting, whatever it is, specific species, habitat, or other things that we find pertinent to the HCP.
Julie?
Yeah, so I think that I'm still of the opinion that it's valuable to delineate the whole research agenda or monitoring agenda that we might have for amphibians. But I wonder if we could add some language that says, the AMPC acknowledges that, that this list is fast and that it won't be something that we accomplish in this first round of, and we'd like to prioritize the first two questions, but at the same time, want to acknowledge in one place all of the questions that we have about amphibians. And, possibly as part of that as well, say, and we recognize that, particularly the questions under question 3 will likely be refined and more specific going down the road, but it's useful, I think, to have an idea of the whole piece in one place.
It definitely would spur more conversation. I think that's I think maybe that was Josh's point, that it houses it with the IRST and then starts their wheels turning, and perhaps that's a good place to be. And, we refine that a little bit more in a back and forth with them. And maybe that even bleeds into our agenda for our combined meeting in the fall. But I don't disagree with you that there's value there in sort of, here's a bigger picture. Interested. Their thoughts.
So do we want to work on editing the language in the kind of preamble for questions to guide their focus to the first two, like you all were discussing?
It sounds like we are getting a little bit of consensus around the table that, and I think it makes some logistic sense to do that, just because I think if we do put some prioritization around it, there is a chance that that little arrow could actually materialize.
Put the arrow back in.
And maybe even if that doesn't materialize, it's somewhere very soon thereafter, and we could sort of get it jammed in to get something moved forward and funded. I think we're more likely to see that if we give that nod to them, that these are sort of fast track questions, and these other ones, let's continue to talk about and work on. in the pipeline, but get them in the pipeline officially. Go ahead.
So my thought was that we strike. If the question 3 doesn't become a question, that we are submitting questions 1 and 2, but we say, this is inside of this world, this is where we're trying to get to understand our knowledge. And we're not sure if it's going to be in fact monitoring, effectiveness monitoring, or is it going to be another question to dig down deeper before we talk about effectiveness monitoring? Because to me, 3's questions are so deep that it's going to take a long time to really understand those questions. And I would not, I almost don't want to, I want to set it in context, use the questions of 3 to set some of the context, but I don't know if we should be submitting calling question 3. I would just say that this is the context we're working towards and our understanding. And because when you were talking about it should be effective monitoring, that's where I was a little bit ago, when I came in today, that's where I was. But now as I listen, I think we need to give them the context. We need to have 3's material be there, but I don't think I want to call it question 3. I don't want to confuse how many questions we're really asking for. We're asking for 1 and 2. And 3 is really setting our stage for the next question. Future question or questions, yeah.
Casey.
I think,
Amanda, yours went up and then Casey.
As we've been talking, I kind of am in a similar spot to Commissioner Topper, just thinking about, like, maybe it's a memo that's an addendum or something to this letter, contextualizing that, maybe we all make an agreement here today or some other future meeting that, we recognize that this is called out in the PFA report as a priority of AMPC to address, how amphibians tie in with the new rules around riparian, harvest RMAs and steep slope rules. And that's a place that we can focus and dig into as the pilot of the effectiveness monitoring. Maybe it's contextualizing like that and making an agreement that that's where we're going to focus first, given its priority in the PFA report, even though it's sort of an optional thing in the PFA report. But I mean, I'm still of the opinion that we should not confuse the issue, include what we actually believe we want to prioritize, also recognizing that that may result in us getting a scoping package in enough time to get this included in the research agenda. And then knowing that the effectiveness stuff is coming, but prioritizing this. So that's where I'm with it.
Casey.
thank you. Just going back to Terry, I appreciated your additional comments about like which rules, which parts of which rules. I like to think that the IRST can open up the rule package just as well as I can, but they do have 0900, 905, 910, and 925 are all the steep slopes rules for Western Oregon, which is approximately the habitat of the 2 species of amphibian that we have listed. Like it seems like we can include those, and then we're very specific, right? That we're not talking about. And 925 includes the what's it called? The small forest land under minimum option. Right. So there's that even includes a little bit more of the details, because as we know from the HCP world, we do need to be thinking about the small forest landowner as well. So that's my proposal, is that we keep this in. I don't like the different versions of language of like, well, we're talking about this, but we're not really talking about it. We're talking about it, but we're going to put it in an addendum. I think we just need to lay out for the IRST that this is what we want, even if we say like the timing of this is please do this first and this second and this third. Giving them the context. I figure if somebody else suggests that gives the context, or maybe it's Julie, for the whole thing. But I think that I'm happy to just pull out the individual rule numbers while we're here and other people are talking. And then I can just text them to you or email them to you.
I mean, if the APC wants to go that way, sure.
For example, it's just 629, 630, 0920 is the small forest landowner minimum option for harvesting and features identified in the slopes model as genetics failures. Like that's one of them that we would say under the proposal of better understanding of repairing and unstable slope protections of at least the current and proposed rules for private forest land and persistence. So we're just saying, here's the things we'd like you to focus on.
Yeah, that sounds fine to me, although I think it's a limited number of things, we could drop that in there, but I'd also be okay with the department putting that together. My more sort of general thought is that I like the idea of including with question 3, because it is more clearly like what we're told to do in the report. So again, if they were just wanting to, I'd feel like, well, what are you doing here? You know, why? Because there's specific language allocating certain money to the initial work, that we should have questions relate to that directive. And the other thing is about, it does link to effectiveness monitoring. However, it is said that it should be the initial effectiveness monitoring project essentially. And especially the conversation that the working group has had on effectiveness monitoring, it seemed like that's going to be a little bit, the bigger project of building that program is going to be a little bit slow. So I think since we're told to do this initially, I would really be hesitant to say, oh, it's part of effectiveness monitoring and work out ways to do it. Really develop that program as an entirety.
Other thoughts? Well, should we wordsmith? It seems like we've got more or less, we're all kind of on the same page. It seems to me like there's an acknowledgement that the priorities for the short term are question 1 and 2. Like to see them work on a scoping proposal in the short term and get that back to us as soon as they can. But the goal, possible, of trying to meet the deadline to get it in the research agenda, and if not, then very soon thereafter. So maybe we could get it sandwiched in one way or another. The other questions, question 3, it seems to me it seems to me the agreement that I hear around the table is that this does get forwarded to the IRST in one format or another. It seems like there's one, maybe the prevailing idea would be to send it as a question, the questions themselves just with a slightly lower priority than 1 and 2, recognizing that there's more work to be done here. The other idea would be to send it forward in some other format, as I heard, an appendice or additional big picture questions that we will be refining in some format forwarding on. So I've heard both of those ideas, but the one common theme in both of that is that 1 and 2 get forwarded ASAP with a prioritization, and that 3 get forwarded in some capacity. Is that right? Does that sound right? Okay, so then we just need to, so if we could work on some wordsmith language up there that, well, I guess we need to decide at what capacity we're sending question 3 on in. I'm, with regards to, searching through rules right now, you feel free to, I think that, regardless of whether we add rules to this right here, I think we do want to have ODF staff go through it and make sure we captured the right rules. And so I don't know, Casey, I don't want to, you can do that. I don't want to tell you don't do it, but at the same time, I do think it makes sense to have staff do that too. So I don't want to take your head out of what we're discussing so that you're doing that. Go ahead.
To defend Terry, or defending me, but to defend Terry, what Terry has said in the past, staff need to have some level of direction to that. That's what I understand at least.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and I think the direction and agreement that MTC wants staff to do it this way or that way. Whether you hand over, putting delegation or Or do you draft up a list and bring it back to us and we'll approve it or prioritize it, or, there's different ways of doing that.
I think that we might be better off just defining what we're talking about in our own terms, and how do we have staff to determine which rules that covers, right? So, and as I read this, so maybe we go there as a tangent first, so we can clarify that, and then we can go to how we're capturing these and forwarding them on. As I read those, the question 3, so if you could scroll down there, Ariel. As I read question 3, starting with the first one, 3.1, we're talking about rules for no harvest RMAs. So we're talking about the harvest rules. We're not talking about road rules. We are not talking about so rules for no harvest RMAs. Does that include skidding potential? Does it include, well, it clearly doesn't include ELZs or type N streams. This is no harvest RMAs. Well, I guess it does include type N perennial, or where those no harvest RMAs are on type N perennial streams, which would make sense, especially for the torrents. And then, but it does it include, are we thinking this includes rules such as skidding or yarding corridors, or, because there are specifics that don't have to do with where you put the line on harvesting the tree. But there are activities that are allowed within those areas to some extent, right? They are curtailed, but in the rules, but there are activities that do occur in those areas. And the way I read this right now, I don't think we're talking about including those. I think we're talking about, so we're not asking for a monitoring study to look at what is the impact of yarding corridors, through, does everybody understand what I'm saying when I use that term?
But just to clarify, we'd be looking at effect, not necessarily monitoring. We're not setting up something with this proposal and saying like, hey, what's happening? We're actually looking at, is there effect for the persistence?
Right, but I'm saying that because it matters, because if we are including all of those, then that also affects where they're going to do monitoring and what questions they're trying to answer, right? And how they're setting it up. So I think and this is part of the point of trying to be as specific as possible in here. I think what I am reading into this is just the very general, where you drawing, where you drew the line, the harvest occurred here, not necessarily a lot of the smaller, more incidental rules, correct? I'm just making sure we're all on the same page.
I would
when
make
we
that
read
same
this.
assumption, yeah.
I think to me, that seems like the implication of the language that is currently there is consistent with what you said.
Okay,
So that's getting not very.
yep, not skidding, not corridors. What else am I missing there? Is there other similar activities?
I mean,
There's road crossings, yeah, so I said that, this is not determined to look at roads, so it would include, crossings. Road crossings would not be included in this research as we're setting it up.
Yeah.
Right, we could have a different research question. I'm not trying to say we would never research those. I'm just trying to clarify what this question
Yeah,
says.
specifying the
Yeah.
rules.
In those areas that have treatments for desired future pollution. You can't do some.
Yeah, totally. That's
Here. This would also not include plans for alternate practice, because these are no harvest RMAs. So there are some of those out there. Am I missing anything?
Thank you to proposing that we don't include plans for alternative practice that include harvesting the harvest. Okay, so you're saying.
Right. Because as I read this is looking at just standard rule, and as you're, like, you weren't including, I would assume anyway, if I was reading that language up there, that I would not include the rule for plan for alternate practice. That's a different question.
Yeah, I did not include that in the list of 5 rules that I have here, but those were just for slopes. But yeah. You could have a PFAS versus slope, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally could.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Really pushing my knowledge drills here.
Stacy.
I'm just curious, I think you raised this, Casey, but we have the SFOs in theory. Would we want to delineate? Should this be focused on standard practice or?
Yeah, the way I read it right now, it's focused on both. Then the question is that what we want?
I learned from the HCP that small forest landowners manage 50% of land that's regulated by the both PA. So you know differently.
We should look at data.
That's right. That's a good point. I can't see this easily. So I think it's important to have that. I want to say that I think the services think it's.
I was just gonna say, in keeping with some of the points that you just made, Seth, that, a lot of these questions are difficult to answer and, in order to be able to see a signal, the simpler and the fewer little strata that you include,
Right.
the more likely you are to actually come up with something meaningful in the end. So, to me, that seems like an argument toward interpreting those questions as, for the predominant case,
Yeah, and I think that would be a wise.
right?
way for
Things
us
be
to move
consistent
forward.
within
Right.
what you're sampling, so that
Right.
we don't just tease a whole bunch of different things out.
Amanda.
Yeah, just kind of to that point, I keep thinking of variables, like what are all the other variables that could be included that we would want, that noise that we would want removed to be able to actually have the. So I guess, I don't know, co-chairs, how long you intend to plan on talking about this, but I mean, just like, I'm probably not gonna be able to agree verbally to all the things we're talking about. Like, I'm gonna need to look at this on a piece of paper and go back and review rule and see what that predominant case is and make sure that isn't it something that we're including that we don't need to be including. So
Yeah.
I guess my point of phrasing that is I'm gonna be a no vote on whatever we decide on this, if there's something decided today, because I need more time to review it.
And I think that's, I hear you, Amanda. What I'm trying to do here is through this discussion, this rabbit hole we went down, is try to give enough information for Terry and ODF staff to know the direction that we are. And so that we're making sure that we understand what each other are talking about, because without this sort of discussion, I might think we're talking about one thing and somebody else thinks we're talking about something else. And so it is important that we try to drill down. I hear what you're saying, because ultimately, when we do get that list of rules together, that will need to be reviewed to make sure that, again, that this addressed the things that, you had in mind when we wrote this question.
Okay, so I guess just to make sure I'm on track with where we're headed. So right now, we've theoretically, all of us have thumbs up that we want to do scoping proposal for question 1 and question 2. At this point, it sounds like the conversation we're having is we want ODF to do a more comprehensive list of rules that would be incorporated into whatever that second research question and required proposed, scoping proposal that goes along with that, or whatever the appendix that we send in addition to the research question package. I'm just trying to figure out, because it all kind of hinges on whether or not this is included in that initial package or not. And I don't know that we've made a decision on that. So we spend a bunch of time today deciding which rules and where to send ODF, but the intent is really to put it into one package, of which I've heard different people have different opinions. And where does that leave us?
Yeah. Yeah,
So should we make it, I mean, it kind of seems like right in the budget for them. Is it in, is it out?
I have thought.
Go ahead, Wendy.
To, include a statement in our sort of letter of instructions that it's our intent to support, the IRST by providing more detail about which rules, on an ongoing basis initially, and then feedback as we move forward, because I think that these are complex, as you point out, and you know, the AMPC is supposed to work back and forth with the IRST. So rather than us thinking that initially we can clarify all of these things, to me, it makes sense just to put in our initial letter, we will be working to clarify specific rules, especially because we aren't telling them to go ahead right away on number 3, ABC, whatever.
this sort of begs the question though, if I could jump in here before, I know you have your card up, Casey, but does this, I mean, I keep kind of in my mind going back to the idea of including this, but including it as, you know, kind of more what the commissioner had in mind of this is where we would like to go next. We realize there's more work to be done in these questions. We are doing this work. But we want you to focus on question 1 and 2, where this is for information. We're passing it as a significant decision, showing each other that we agree that this is important to include, but it's not quite ready for your scoping proposal yet. We will have another meeting. We'll get you some additional information, and then you can move forward to the scoping proposal with 3. I mean, I don't know whether that makes sense to people, but it seems to me like we're kind of saying the same thing anyway, whether we're really close on how we're doing it. At this point, it's just the logistics of how we're messaging this, giving people a chance to, you know, what are the rules that we're actually talking about? What are the specifics? Let's review that. Let's get comfortable with that. Make sure we're all on the same page. And then forward that to them in some additional capacity, and then trigger saying, yep, now it's 5. Now it's ready. We gave it to you before as, you know, a signal that that's where we're headed with a larger picture here.
Just raising the question that we haven't heard from Dave or Jason today, and I know it's harder to jump in from online.
Yeah, and I see Casey's card has been.
I'm here too.
Oh,
Oh.
yours is down, Julie. Okay, so let's go Casey, and then we'll go online because David looked like you came off mute there for it, so I'll consider your card up.
Well, let's do Dave first. I mean, I've spoken like 10 times.
Okay, go ahead, Dave. Anything to add?
Other than, I mean, not specifically, other than, in my view, we should move forward on the questions 1 and 2, but then provide this question 3, change its heading or whatever you want, but so that the IRST has an overview of what the, you know, what the grand plan is here. I guess the way I've looked at this whole thing is that back in my profession, you know, you never winnow down at the outset. You try to think big and then winnow down later as you gather more information. And I think we could gather that more information with the help of IRST to help finesse this question 3 business. But in the meantime, try to move forward with 1 and 2. That's what my thought is.
Thank you. That was helpful feedback, Casey.
Yeah, thank you. Wendy, can you, I think of sets proposed moving forward and Mandy's that there are differences. Can you describe your proposal again? Which I think was around like telling them, signaling like, we're going to give you more specifics, but for now, here's what we're looking for.
Yeah, my thought was, my preference would be to just say, here are questions 1 and 2. Additionally, we have put these questions 3. We asked you to prioritize 1 and 2. So including them, all 3 as questions rather than say an appendix. But my thought and response to what Amanda said was we could say specifically that the AMPC expects to be providing further information about which rules, like a list of rules, and is happy to work with you on back and forth on an ongoing basis. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay. Well, then I still have my, yeah, that's the approach I think I would prefer. So thank you for describing it more in a way that I hear.
The only distinction there, let me make sure I understand this correctly, because the only distinction I hear is moving question 3 forward as an official question. That's the only distinction I hear in the proposal that you have versus sort of Amanda, Will, Dave, and my thought there, right? Am I missing anything?
No, I agree with you. You sort of framed it as two things, and I'm saying I'm in favor of that one of including it as a proper question.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so I wonder if there's a way to marry those up. That is to say, could you say this is an official question that we recognize needs additional drilling down, and we will do that work, but we're giving it to you as an official question? Or maybe it's not drilling down, maybe it's just refining for purposes of working, of pointing an actual, of creating an actual proposal, per se.
If you're asking, you're looking at me, so I need to say back if I can, that I really like the way Dave put it. You're saying, for bigger picture context, this is the overarching goal, which is partly contained in question 3. Like I've said before, like to me, that's kind of the directive that's in the report that we're required to do. So I think it's important to have IRST see that.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess that's what I was getting at. Let's go Julie and then Stacy.
Yeah, I feel very much like you do, that questions 1 and 2 are a little bit unsatisfying to me. I can see their importance, but I would feel more comfortable if we actually address the things that were in the private forest accord. And I'm agnostic about whether question 3 is an official question or not. I don't really care, but I do care quite a bit that it's not separated out into an appendix or a memo. I'd like everything all together. And so I guess the way I would think about doing it is we say, we'd like scoping proposals on questions 1 and 2. In addition, in the future, we will be coming to you, and instead of providing more detail now, I think that will require more and more discussion as we, try and pin it down. I think we should if anything, pull back on the detail and maybe just have a bulleted list. In the future, expect us to come to you with specific questions related to the effects of no harvest, RNAs, type in streams,
Sorry, I'll stop. What I was gonna say,
Creative problem solving.
What if I like your idea, Julia, and I think we're circling in on something that could work for everybody. If we had question 1 and 2, question 3 we list, but we look forward to more discussion with you, the IRST, at our upcoming joint meeting and subsequent co-chairs discussions, where we can further refine these questions in question 3 to move into a scoping phase or something like that, where we're actually fully signaling these are questions, but we know we need more discussion with you to turn them into actual researchable questions that hit the mark.
That sounds good to me.
Stacy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I agree with Wendy, preference for question 3 to be a question, but I like where you were going, Julie, and where you were just taking us up, which is, it's still in the package, it's not separated out in the appendix, but it has the context that there needs to be, we need to provide you with more information, there needs to be more discussion between IRST and AFC, and this is where we plan to go, following the direction of the PFA report, or some contextual paragraph that clearly articulates that. I think that would be workable.
Okay, Amanda.
I'm just looking at the other parts of the package, where we have the research under B, where we have the research, the objective of the research, and then the context of the research questions. And so, I'm just looking at the PFA report language on, amphibians. So, yeah, the B.4. And it specifies in here that there's uncertainty around the amphibian population characteristics, distribution, productivity, survival, and abundance. And that's sort of what we're trying to get at with 1 and 2, right? And I think that's what we should be tying into around the objective of the research, the context. And the second part of that is a robust effectiveness monitoring plan as part of an adaptive management program will be used to better understand the relationship between forest management, recovery, and amphibian species. That's when it gets into the initial 1.5 million and what we're kind of supposed to be tied into. And so to me, regardless, I mean, if we want them to focus on 1 and 2 when we have a scoping proposal, we will not have a scoping proposal, and the question 3 will not be a part of a research agenda until July of 2027. So we can take our time. We don't have to rush into getting question 3 right if it's not going to be included in the research agenda anyways. If we include it as a part of, as an official question, and then that delays question 1 and 2 from being a part of the research agenda for this, year 2025, then what is the point, I guess? Like, we want to get something moving forward. We want to address that first piece of what's in that chapter around the disturbance of population. We need to know more where we can dig in. So, I mean, my suggestion is contextualize it, right? Include that stuff and highlight it and be very specific in the package that this is where we are heading. But take our time to get that right I'm thinking about from a regulated population, heavily regulated in the state, of which we're looking to see, are we regulated enough? Are we regulated too much? That matters significantly to the population that I serve. So I am inclined to include that contextual information, highlight, where we're going, and even, maybe if there's a draft question identified in that last, other information section at the bottom, to come. And then we pull that out. And that's why I'm saying pull it out, because I don't want to bog down the other 2 questions.
So before you, Terry, I saw you wanting to jump in. I know we've had some initial discussion. This idea that the agenda gets created in the way that it gets created every 2 years or whatever, that is in rule. It is what the authors envisioned. I will say the authors are learning a lot, trial by fire, right? And I think that we have had some discussion about, is it really necessary that we wait every 2 years to get something? So like if we get funds put in right now, right? So we've got 3 million sitting there, or 2 and change, or whatever it's going to end up being. And if we get some additional funds through the legislature, which, knock on wood, hopefully that happens, then we'll have money sitting there. Doesn't make sense for that money to be then sit there for 2 years before another research agenda can be brought forward? Or does it make more sense to have the research agenda be a little bit more fluid than that and have opportunity to get a scoping proposal move forward? And then we bring that to Board of Forestry. AMC doesn't say, hey, this is a priority. We've got money. Let's move forward. Like, we shouldn't have to just wait for the calendar. And so I know that we've discussed, and Terry's been something, and even this group has discussed at times, like, can we is there a need for a rule change? What do we need to do to be able to loosen this up a little bit? I do think there is desire to do that. So I hear you on the timing piece. And certainly if we're stuck in this process and there's no room for change, then absolutely everything you just said is 100% true. Even if we're not stuck in this process and we can see some fluidity built into it, I think that there's still validity in what you're saying. And in that you're saying that we have a little bit of time here. Let's not rush to get something when this stuff really does matter. We do need to make sure that we're solid on what we're saying and what we're forwarding. I think that's all very true. And I think, but I don't think that's necessarily not reflected. I think that is reflected in the conversation we're talking about having with IRST so that it can refine. So I don't hear a total like misalignment there with what's being talked about from others. But I did just want to put out there, and Terry, I don't know if you want to respond to that.
That's right. The rule does say research agenda, September board decision of odd years. And in talking over with some other folks, it looks like, especially at the beginning, when everything's still ramping up, there's uncertainty about lots of things. There's the opportunity for the board to come back and amend their decision. We decided on a research agenda like this, and 6 months later, we revisit that and modify our decision. So that is doable. Whether or not you want to do that every cycle is a different question. And we can, that's another cycle is years down the road, but for this coming biennium, I think that is an option to have the board revisit that.
That's helpful. That's really helpful because I do know we did talk about it, but the process by which that would take, I wasn't sure. So the amendment process for Board of Forestry makes sense. Casey?
Yeah, thank you. To the question of are 1 and 2 sufficient to meet the spirit of the PFA final report? And are we rushing in? I heard at least, are we rushing into question 3? To be clear, all 3 of these were concepts from the very beginning of our conversations about amphibians. It's 3, what has become 3 is something that I've understood us to need as a person who lives in both the policy and ecology worlds and represents an authors group. I wanted to clarify though that the first sentence of 7.3.4 adaptive management in sub B dot 4, sorry. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that page 8, the bottom of page 8 of the amphibians question, version 2. The sentence is uncertainty exists around amphibian population characteristics, distribution, productivity, survival, and abundance. That is questions 1, 2, and 3. It's not like you can do questions 1 and 2 and fully eliminate the uncertainty around all those. And that's because we don't know about, we don't know the question of how our forest practices affecting the survival, distribution, productivity, and abundance of amphibian species.
Go ahead, Amanda.
I guess one just quick counter would be that when we do some research today, that will tell us how the previous rules have affected for their entire life. See, so if they are abundant, doing well, I mean, one could argue that forest practices are not significantly affecting them or that their populations are doing good. Now, the second part of that is the new rules, right? So to me, yes, you can't get rid of all uncertainty, never have 100% certainty of anything in life, right? Especially in the life sciences and biology and technology. But I guess that would be my kind of counter to that.
Definitely. My counter to that would be that these species are on a list for a reason. It's because they're imperiled or they're at risk of becoming imperiled. That's what we're talking about. And the habitats in which they live, which overlap with our human habitats.
All right, Stacy.
I guess, I mean, I'm hearing, and then I think agreement, at least in including this concept in the package and concern around the deadline, which I totally share. Like, I think I have definitely been pushing us to get an amphibians question because of how much I want that to be part of the conversation. So I appreciate everyone's work on that. So I definitely share that. And I'm wondering if there's a way in that intro language that we can really make that much more clear to the IRST that, you know, our intention is that they're working, responding to 1 and 2. We've included 3. Yeah, words said out loud right now, but to get to the point of like that we want to be responsive to the direction provided. We know that this is an important question. We don't expect a scoping proposal from you by this 45 day, that, you know, somehow to make it very clear. We want to continue having conversation with you. We're including this because it's important. And we also have more work to do. I don't know. I'm just wondering if maybe there's a timeline language change that can get closer.
And Ariel's got some stuff up there. Ariel, maybe, I'm sorry.
It's like, I'm just gonna go with it, man.
It's just funny, my mind went there, because I was. We used to have Eric Cowan working in the department. And, yeah. and so-
I missed it, so I was like, why is this here?
And I was listening to the fire thing just the other day and saw her name, which is why, like, it's weird that came out of my brain. But anyway, Emily,
Yeah.
Emily is, so Emily, could you take your cursor and put it where you first started wordsmithing and just hit enter? So you could separate that whole
Yeah.
section from the previous paragraph, just so we can, and we maybe, take those separations out eventually, but it helps my brain at least to see what you're working on there.
Yeah.
And she's got some wordsmithing there that she's done. But before we sort of dig into that, I want to, Amanda, I don't know if you have a response or a thought.
No, so I think, kind of what Stacy was saying, I think that gets me more there. I'm still concerned about the high level language, not specifying the recognizing that there is supposed to be in some ways a wall on the policy stuff with IRST. I mean, we are the policy group and they are the science group for a reason. So we are supposed to be making the policy decision. So it really shouldn't be a back and forth on, well, what policies do you think that we should research? And so there, I mean, we need to be careful there. And so,
I hear you.
I
And
mean, I guess that's where I get concerned of including it as an official question versus including it as contextual information.
I thought about that too in as I was reading some of the language that the other Ariel.
Now it's gonna be.
So, as she was writing that, I did have a similar thought in that, but at the same time, I do recognize that it could be, there could be a very useful back and forth discussion that we could have with them that wouldn't be necessarily them be telling us what we should be studying, but rather sort of helping us think about, nesting questions and which questions would come first sort of thing and how we might get at certain aspects of this. So I don't know, that might come out in how we wordsmith this. Emily?
That's why I initially was saying, provided via ongoing discussions with IRST, but I put via ongoing communications with IRST. So it's kind of like directing more towards, hey, we're providing you with the rules and there's probably gonna be multiple conversations, but
That's
we're
a-
providing it.
that's a good way to
Just
do it.
FYI, like I thought it might be, more directional that way. So it's like,
Communications could include a discussion or it could
Or it
include
could
just
just
us giving
include-
you information.
exactly.
Okay, so let's
Yeah, I
look at
think
the
that makes
language
sense.
she has here and people's thoughts on this. But Wendy, I think, might have come up first and then her.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a way of addressing the policy science split, which I was thinking it could be something like the AMPC looks forward to supporting and directing IRST about the questions, including what rules are included, and looks forward to discussions about feasibility and scientific issues for IRST. So something that would split the two issues that jurisdiction, say, of those two committees.
Okay, it'll take.
Did I say that?
That was a little quick. Give me 1
You
second.
want to say it again?
Yeah, go
I
ahead. Say it again.
Magic.
INPC looks forward to supporting and directing IRST about the question, including the specific rules. And then
the IRST will like the idea of us directing them.
Maybe providing more specific direction.
Yeah, providing more specific direction.
Yeah.
Or guidance, like,
And,
Yeah.
Like Commissioner Tucker, so he started calling me commissioner, so I get to again.
No, I.
It's hard not to.
But my,
Well, I was taught when somebody gets elected, you need to.
your honor, respect that. Okay, so the thought I have is that Wendy's, I think, catching a piece of it. For me, I still believe that as we go through reading their responses to question 1 and 2, their questions or their scoping packages, that I'm gonna feel better about completing a more robust number 3. And so she's catching it, and so I'm happy with this as a way to move 1, 2, and 3 together. But knowing that for me, 3 still needs more understanding, for me at least, before I want to put that forward.
Fully.
Yeah.
Really understand that.
Okay.
Casey.
For some wordsmithing,
Sorry, I jumped over Wendy.
oh, sorry, I was gonna say that if we want to, we could add the second part of my thought, which be, and getting feedback from IRST about feasibility and scientific issues or something like that. So I'm trying to split
Okay.
into 2 parts, I mean, that saying.
Your part, our part.
Now, Casey.
thank you. I don't think we need to have the 2 included in the 2025 research agenda, which is in the first sentence. And partly because that's not really they don't need to know that, they just need to know that there's a 45-day. Their clock is this particular one. Because as we've talked about, we don't know. I don't want them to be pressured by that to try to put together something that's maybe not quite right. The other thing is just to say that where it says the subject matter reflected by this question, but is not expected to be addressed during the initial 45-day time period. It maybe just to me, the language might be better suited as we ask that it not be subject to the 45-day. Which to me is more a formal way of saying
It's not
Yes.
subject.
we ask that it not be subject to the 45-day timeframe.
And I'm just thinking about the legality.
Legality.
The rules say they have to answer you within 45 days
Okay.
of getting a question.
But remember, their answer is just,
Right, that's right.
It's just-
Timeline.
we
Yes,
expect it.
right.
So maybe what we signal to them is we expect that timeline to be much longer.
Yes,
Because we still need to work on refining.
yes.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with that.
yeah.
I understand.
And just naming it, Jason you've heard from Jason, it's often got a lot of right?
Yeah.
Things to say.
Yeah, I'm still on. Sorry, guys. I've been driving, so I've been trying to listen in and not interrupt. My thoughts, kind of going back to what Dave had said originally, I think 1 and 2 is good. I think as we think about 3, the way this is coming together, I guess I'm more open to that. I did want to get a little bit of better sense because I was in a weird area when Amanda was talking about her outright objection. I just wanted to kind of better understand that because I couldn't hear all of it. So, Amanda, if you could just recap that, and I want to know kind of where you're at with as we're moving through this.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry that you were in a bad spot. So you have to listen to my voice again, but for us, I mean, we're a heavily regulated industry, and once we start getting into the effectiveness monitoring piece, there's exposure for us. And I'm concerned that having it open and not specifying which rules or what we're really wanting them to research, it doesn't leave me feeling very confident in what we're gonna get. So I think we need to be more, I think we need to be more, I can't think of the word right now.
Specific.
Like specific and intentional.
I think if I was one of your members, I would be asking, what is it you're actually, what is it you're actually going to be measuring on the ground,
Mhm.
right? Are you going to be looking at, you know, which ones of these rules are going to be the ones that are going to be measured for this question that you prioritized?
And honestly, that 3.1 is kind of in some ways less of a concern to me because it's the no harvest area. It's more the other pieces, some of the steep slope stuff and the pipe end stream rules that is looking at that, you know, we didn't even get into on the specifics, but it's you know, this stuff is complicated and it warrants our you know, long form conversation. That's my concern.
Fair enough. And that question, that one on the steep slopes is an interesting one because that rule package does have, you know, there is the gummies, as we talked about, right? Which is fairly straightforward. But then there's the blobs, which are less straightforward and allow for exceptions of which ones you can harvest and which ones you can't. And then even how those get delineated, right? And so what part of that process or questions are we actually asking them to measure? We just have, you know, anyway, I don't think we need to answer all of that right now. I'm just acknowledging that I think you're right, that those rules are more nuanced.
So it's like, for those, are we looking at areas that there's actually been a slide and delivery of material? Because that's the intent,
Right.
but how has that happened?
Well, and to that point, those rules are brand new,
Yeah.
right? Which are all of these rules. And so are you going to even have a sample size that's large enough? Riparian's probably a little bit easier because it gets repeated many, many times across the state. But those rules are going to be rather difficult. I would think you would need more years to have enough sample size to actually even measure. But I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I would think. Wendy.
I just wanted to say, to Jason, that since you can't see the screen, right now, Emily's typed in the language that the AMPC looks forward to supporting and guiding the IRST regarding question 3 and the specific rules being addressed in all 3 questions. So that's the language that Emily typed in response to the discussion that you asked about.
In all 3 questions of question 3?
Yes.
Okay.
You mean like question 1,
Great.
2?
Maybe just being addressed, period.
Okay, yep, we'll do
Yeah.
that,
I
sorry.
think there are any rules that are referencing.
And the first 1 and 2, oh, okay.
Questions 1 and 2.
Oh, okay, good, all right,
But
sorry.
not some.
Right.
That makes sense, I wanted to make sure,
Yeah, good.
yeah, we were
Very
covered.
I think we talked about removing the language about the 45-day window, right? We just said we recognize it'll take substantially longer before we're ready to move forward with.
We
That's
ask,
right, that was the language.
so,
Yeah.
so we ask,
I think the only way we can not have it trigger the 45 days is to have it not be a question.
Right. Well, yeah,
They can come back with, in 45 days, they can say, this is how long it'd take for us to do
Yeah,
it.
that's what I'm saying.
That's fine. So if we just remove reference to that, then it gets rid of that
Right.
confusion.
I
We
was-
just recognize that it's gonna be a longer process before we arrive at something for.
do you want to explicitly state that it'll be a longer process to do sort of, however you want to
Yeah,
phrase that?
however Seth said it, obviously from my reaction. To remember exactly what he said.
I give 5 to do like statement, suggestion. Or no, you haven't used our consent numbers.
Like complete, or do you mean it's more complete?
No. So I'm trying.
No, just
to
look
keep
at
it
amazing. My colleagues, really, it's really challenging to.
I was just.
I would do, I'm really, so you guys,
Oh, I
Be
can take
gentle
the
with her.
ribbing, it's okay. I think it's funny, don't
I
worry.
was just teasing.
Thank you, Sarah.
I think it's funny that it read it as red.
I know.
I
it's-
was like,
it hasn't
is
been-
that actually a word?
it-
right, I don't know.
That's, the computer thought.
Oh, well, spell check has been.
More
weird.
It hasn't been working it hasn't been working today because I've had several typos that I auto corrected while you guys were talking. So FYI, I'm going off without spell check right now.
It's amazing.
Okay.
I think that's a great way to put it, that last phrase.
Looks like Sean has something Sean
Yeah.
Gordon has something.
Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say to be clear on if that question is not finalized, it wouldn't be good for the IST to spend time on trying to figure out the timeline to answer it. So if we want to avoid that, could we just say that question hasn't been finalized? So is not subject to the 45-day rule?
That was kind of where I was getting at in the beginning. I think that's,
Basically what I was.
I would be more comfortable doing it that way, personally. I think it is, it's more accurate to where we actually are on that question. A little bit funky to say, there's a question, but if we're gonna work on it some more, and give you more information later. And give us a 45-day time period, or,
Within 45 days, so how long it
takes,
takes.
how long it's gonna take to answer this question that we haven't fully.
Let's go through.
Yeah.
How about this?
I think it's really important.
Yeah, good.
So what's reasonable, Casey? Go ahead and finish your thought.
I think that we should have question 3 as a finalized question. And the reason I do that is because the next step in the process is just getting the, within 45 days, an initial scoping. Right?
The time frame.
The timeframe, yes, thank you. And shortly after that, we will have more specific numbers and rules that we've agreed on. I feel at least by our June meeting.
So does what's up there right now capture that? You?
Okay.
I don't know, let me just ask a temperature check on this. If we were to say, question 3 is not a finalized question, we're giving it to you to show you where we're heading. We will work on finalizing this in the near term. How much heartburn do people have over that
Fine,
around the table?
Which is,
high.
yeah.
Which is high. Acceptable.
Okay, so let's use our fingers, right? So like the, what, remind me of the finger.
5 is like full support.
Love it. 4 is okay. 3 is I can live with it. 2, I can't really.
But
live
what is
with
the
it.
it? I guess I want.
The it is, let me answer this real quick, Tina. The it is forwarding question 3, not as a, but putting it on here, it's not a,
So we support that we say it's not final.
it's not finalized.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So Wendy, before we take this temperature check.
Preliminary research question, right? Is that the category they are? So I think it is our initial foray of a research question. It's a preliminary research question. So in any event, we will finalize that IRC is working to finalize it. So to me, it seems a little weird to say this is not.
None of them are
preliminary question.
But when we give them a finalized research question, we ask them to start working on a research, what's the word? Scoping proposal. We ask them to tell us first, tell us, have a discussion amongst yourselves with IRST to determine how long it's going to take to get this scoping proposal put forward. That's the first question. And then they give us that. And then they start working on, okay, what are the steps that we need to take to get this entire scoping proposal put forward? So what Sean is saying is that to him, and I totally can understand this, it doesn't make sense for them to spend a bunch of time coming up with how long is this, how long are we going to take to make the scoping proposal when these questions could be changed in some capacity. They could be whittled down or broken apart or whatever, right? And so it would make more sense for us to have a cleaner questions before they give us that time frame. So that's all I'm asking is with the language that Emily had up there, that said, this is, number 3 is not a final question yet, but we're giving it to you preliminarily anyway.
I can change that.
How, where would people be with that? And it's just a temperature check. I'm just curious where people would be with that. Okay, let's show fingers.
Sorry, I just have a proposal, so that would be different than this, so I'm not gonna have a.
But I have a question.
Okay, all right.
I'm done.
Okay, I'll get Stacy and then Casey and then we'll redo that. I saw 4s.
And just understand
They
the
should.
process, their next step is just to give us an estimate. So they could say, it'll take us a year to do a scoping proposal. And I guess I would just do a reality check, nothing against IRST, but they have moved back their own timeline several
Yeah.
times.
Yeah,
So I guess that doesn't give me as much concern because that, they could set their own timeline. They could say 2 years and we could push back. I don't know. It doesn't lock anything
Yeah.
in as the way that we've done it so far. So I guess.
Casey.
Yes, good point. And one other way to perhaps think about it is that if we go to the scoping proposals, is that, and this could be considered 2 different scoping proposals, and one comes in. And that's the seven functions, 3.1, 3.2, or 3.3, and scoping proposal A is questions 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So we're sending all of them, but just recognizing that they're going to be split out. We can send them now as preliminary research questions with this understanding that they're going to have different timeframes. So that's my proposal.
Yep. So I'm hearing, without the fingers even, I'm hearing one segment that is fairly okay with them not being official questions, and another segment that's not okay with it. Is that fair? And I'm just trying, I just want to make sure that because what we want to do is work to consensus as much as we can. That's our goal. And so if that's not doable, or if you guys feel strongly about that, that's fine. We just know we'll need to work in that direction in some way. Stacy?
Yeah, I would have done a 3, I guess. I just want
Okay.
to ask my question first. So I certainly recognize all those concerns. I can be okay with that. I'm
With
still
that.
unclear how exactly we format it it seems more clear to have them be questions that we send when we start filling it out and giving them different labels. I guess that seems less clear to me.
Mhm.
So that's one of my concerns, but certainly agree with all the points about delay and timeline and stepping forward. So in the spirit of that, I can definitely be okay with a version of 3 that's not a final question, whatever we want to call it. But I do want to see how that is presented in this document. And I would prefer that it would just be a research question that's.
Okay. I hear you. Amanda's got her hand up, or her card up.
So I guess then people could shoot me down, that's fine, it's all time, but this is what gets me back to. And I guess I'd be curious what Sean's perspective is from an IRST, thought is. I agree, having multiple different categories of questions in a proposal or in a package is confusing. So why can't we just take the 3rd question out into its own package? It's a preliminary question separate than the other one. We're already identifying 2 scoping proposals. One is going to take longer. That's just, I understand the reason to mingle them all together. But I also think that these are smart people, and having them in 2 separate documents doesn't mean that they're completely separate either. And that they're all associated with the amphibians. So why can't we just have 2 separate packages that don't have the issues commingled? Know that this one's going to take a little bit more time, a little bit more hand holding, a little bit more structure to get from preliminary question to final. And the other 2 that we already have consensus on can just move forward through the process and try to get to that scoping proposal for the research agenda. To me, that's cleaner.
I do see some value there. My mind was going in a similar place that if we were to forward all three of these questions as research questions, knowing that the first two would be on a faster trajectory and the third one would be longer, there might be some sense to having at least calling that out very clearly in the one document, if not splitting it out completely in two documents, but which is another idea. So go ahead.
I think that,
Emily had one.
I actually had to think of your name.
Yeah, now it's Ariel, Emily.
Emily went before I had said.
Well, you know what, totally, there is some similarities between.
I don't know who this Ariel person is, so I can't say, but I'll.
Very nice and very helpful.
Oh, well, that's great. Just something, sorry, I know that I'm not like a voting member or anything, but just something that, I remember you guys kept talking about is how like the first two questions are how they're answered could, help with the third question. So it kind of does, like, in my mind, make sense to have it there as like supporting material, and saying, hey, don't work on this one right now. But when you're doing answering questions 1 and 2, the way you answer it, the research you do, like keep in mind like what info you're gonna have to get from that to answer question 3 down the pipeline. Like, so that's just my 2 cents. It's something that you guys kind of touched on earlier, and I just wanted to bring it back around to that to consider.
Yeah, these are not completely unrelated. The way you answer question 1 will definitely have some impact, or the way that you organize that research could definitely help you in getting to question 3.
Okay. I just want to note to that Stacy has very impressive name and.
Oh, yes.
I don't think that, I don't recall us identifying previously that there would be multiple scoping proposals. But since that is an option, because I think it's valuable to have this all be together. But is to come back to this idea that we actually say 1 and 2, we want a scoping proposal for 1 and 2, and we want a separate scoping proposal for 3. Because then that does split them onto different timelines automatically, without being like, these are good and this one, we're not so certain about it. But it does recognize that they are really different and that we're gonna have a lot more conversations or communications, to Emily's point, between IRST and EMC about question 3.
Julie.
Yeah, so I hear your point about it being cleaner to separate them. And I also see, I mean, just from our conversation today, it's going to take us a long time to refine question 3. And although I agree too that IRST probably can keep track that these things that are in 2 different things are related. But if that doesn't come out for months, a year later, they'll be well along their way on this other thing without realizing that this other piece is out there that we're working on. So I still think it needs to be there. And I wonder if we could change the language in the question or sentence 2 to maybe.
Which one? I have 2 different versions of one.
Sorry.
That
Gray. Okay.
maybe the gray one. This is, yeah.
Maybe. Is the gray what we're going with now? I was not up.
I don't think
there.
I have them both.
It was a proposal.
They're 2 separate proposals.
Yeah, and that's one that I have.
I guess I was looking at the first one.
Can you ungray it? I can't.
Yeah, apologies. Yeah.
I understand why you're graying it. I just.
If we went with the first one, I would say that a longer process to refine the questions to sort of imply that realize that we're not same place there as we are in the first 2. And complete a scoping proposal.
I like the first
I'm not sure what the last sentence in the first paragraph is conveying. Yes, that.
It's something Wendy mentioned that I tried to include. I don't know if it's relevant now.
Yeah, and I was trying to sort of capture the idea that AMPC is doing the policy and they would look that it would appreciate feedback from IRST as to feasibility and scientific questions. It's just trying to separate those two kind of jurisdictions. So that's, I think that last sentence was a response to my saying that.
Maybe not researching the subject matter covered, but like the specific wording of the question if it's researchable. Or maybe you're trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to me, I would say something like, and looks forward to feedback from IRST as issues of feasibility and scientific process.
Okay. Okay, can you say that one more time?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And looks forward to feedback from IRST as to feasibility and scientific process. Feedback from IRST as to feasibility and scientific process.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
Just now.
Oh, Jason.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I just had a quick question on the text there for Sean. I know you had mentioned before, kind of including it creates a little bit of potential focus area interest, but what based on how it's written right now, does this clear? Do you think this is going to throw IRST off? Is there any additional feedback that you have? I just want to track how this is going to be received.
Well, I'm not entirely sure. I think it's clear enough, and I think you know, Terry and I can communicate to the IRST what's intended here, if there's any confusion. So it's a little bit different, right? We're still we're hitting some unique kind of requests on each one of these packages. So I guess we just have to work our way through it.
Okay. Thanks, Sean.
Okay, gotta get rid of that.
Go ahead, Amanda.
I just have a kind of a higher level question, maybe for the co-chairs, just kind of the precedent that we're setting here is that whenever there's a topic that we're interested in, we want to include multiple questions. Like if people have a lot of different questions about a topic, want to include them all in one package. And they shouldn't be separated because they're connected in some way. That's sort of what I'm getting here today is a precedent being set. So is that the precedent that we want set as we try to develop a framework and not have so many unique situations in every single letter and package that we send? It's just a question that I have. We don't have to answer it right now, but just thinking about how this could affect future conversations down the road, 2-3 years from now.
All right, Stacy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. I guess this more reflects a compromise to get us to consensus, because I think when some of us, at least for myself, when I look at the report, that question 3 is well within that scope of the amphibians question, and the best direction that we've been given in the very broad topic of amphibians comes from the report. And so it, in my mind, fits well under that umbrella. And it's not so much additional things we're interested in about amphibians under one package, but rather, again, for myself, looking at asking questions that are responsive to the direction we've been given. But I also see your point that it could set precedent in the future But I think it depends on how you're seeing it. So I'm not interpreting it that way, but it may be, I don't know. So,
Yeah, I would hope, I mean, I think that what we're doing here is a response to these first three research topics that we were given, right? And that's probably different than the way this program will moving forward with research questions coming forward. That'll be more specific and not directed at these bucket items. I would hope, and so I guess I would put on the record that this shouldn't necessarily be a precedent, that certainly you could do it this way in the future with a broader set of questions. But it could also very much be a specific question that gets prioritized, and I see that probably as a higher likelihood with future questions, is that they will be more specific from the house, from the get-go. I don't know.
Okay, and I just a quick follow-up. So recognizing that the report specifically states that these should be included in, the question 3 should be included in effectiveness monitoring plans. So in the future, we would expect that because this is a unique situation, that anything that's associated with effectiveness monitoring should be covered under that effectiveness monitoring framework and not included like we're including it here with other types of research.
yeah, and I guess maybe I'm just looking at a different, the clearest direction, I guess that's informing my view of question 3 is lower down in that paragraph, and not that I don't think they're at odds, but again, to me, it reads more as a funnel, where pulled up, initially applied to research the first funding cycle of the dock management program to better understand how recurring unstable slope protections of at least the current and proposed rules for practical forest lands impact persistence of populations. Authors agree that 1.5 million be used to fund initial study. So I guess maybe it's a difference of interpretation of that paragraph. That they're not exclusive, or by covering it here, we could then not address it elsewhere.
Wendy, and then I want to have her take a process check.
Yeah, and sort of, I would say I feel sort of in a way ready to move on, because I feel like this is, although these are questions that we'll maybe have to address at some point, but we're at this beginning point, as you're saying, we're told what to do here. So I feel we're well on our way of doing what we're told to do in the report. So I guess we're ready to move on to me, I like the language that's up there, and I feel we could adopt one of those versions.
All right, so with a minor wordsmith that I would offer, and then I want to do a process check and maybe look at taking a break here. The AMC, that first paragraph, the AMC requests IRC provide scoping proposals for question 1 and 2. Would it be possible, or do you guys think it makes sense to add as soon as possible after that? 1 and 2 as soon as possible, or as soon as possible with the aim at including these in consideration for 2025.
We had that earlier and got rid of it.
Right, I guess I'm
Yeah, I just
maybe
requested it.
wordsmithing it a little bit to say that. And that's not to say give it to us by July, but rather give it to us with hopefully in time, whatever that means, to meet the, so sort of a signal that really want this quickly. You know, we can't force them, and they have work to do, and they're, you know. But I think a signal sooner rather than later, some urgency to that would be helpful. And do we want to say question 3 is not currently expected to be addressed,
Yeah,
or
just
just
the language. I think
question 3 is not expected?
Another way to say that would be
Yeah,
that
what's another?
question 3, we ask that question 3B have its own scoping proposal, which separates it from questions 1 and 2, which have an elevated or accelerated timeframe request in them. Does that make sense? Right, we're like,
Yes.
we want these ASAP. We also are fine with question 3 not being in that ASAP bucket.
Yeah.
And then language sounds like, well, here's why.
With that, Terry, the other things on our agenda, I know we need to take a vote here at some point in the very near future. We also have responding to the IRST. Eastern Oregon piece and some discussion around that, and then the charter
And
discussion.
and effective
monitoring.
So effectiveness monitoring discussion. Okay, so, can we take a 9-minute break, be back at 2:30 and, let Emily finish wordsmithing a little bit there and then.
We have to take a pump.
No break.
So
Okay.
that's the,
Okay, let's go ahead and jump in there and finish something up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
let's go ahead and break until 2:30.
What?
Do what you need to do and we'll be back.
I don't think so, no. But just in case, I have my. Okay. Okay, Green's house. Nice to be, but yeah. Thank you. I have the one. I'll sleep with it. Yeah, okay. I think that's good. Yeah, that'll probably take me like 17 minutes or so, because I have to get it all set up.
Oh, yeah.
How many direct reports do you have now? Like, were you working?
It's less than.
It's nice.
It's like working my favorite.
Well, and you don't have two completely separate units, I mean, Forest Health.
Yeah. Yeah, water quality fits in a little better. It meshes.
Yeah. Yeah, because Forest Health went over to
Jesse.
Jesse. Okay. Can't remember who fell in there, because both have some level of small forest lane stuff.
Is that always the safety and wellness right there?
No, that's.
Like a story.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I remember
It's
sitting there.
been.
It's been like that for like a year.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like it just happened, until like last week or something.
That'd be your standard senior.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
Count as cupcakes?
Well past the hill. No. Yeah. Well, maybe.
Yeah, you don't want to be well past. You want to be approaching in the far distant future, that halfway point.
I'm reminded regularly that I am past.
So when you get to be my age, you do in fact look at the newspaper every single day and see who you know who's died.
I'm so grateful for our local newspaper so that I can keep track, unfortunately, of
Yeah,
my friends and mentors and.
nice reunion notifications and things.
So just FYI, I can't seem to,
Those still exist?
I can't seem to mute the room, so just.
Thank you for that word.
You can,
I can't get the pointer over the thing.
Oh my gosh, is it stuck on leave?
No, there's like, you can see there's this other arrow that
Oh.
doesn't, it's like, it's hit a barrier.
Like share.
Do they-
Oh, that's somebody's share.
Who's the one with the?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
There we are. That's a good idea.
And then, yeah.
Oh, we unmuted? All
Yeah.
right.
Sorry,
We're
I should have told you I plugged that in.
we're just getting back.
Rip that out of your.
No, it's on the table.
Today. Okay, I think where we left off, there was a little bit of more wordsmithing going on there under the paragraph starting in the AMC request, IRC, or not wordsmithing, but word clarification. Terry was doing some typing. So take a moment to read through that. And see
I
where
guess
we're at.
first question is provide a scoping proposal.
Yeah.
And it could be more concise to highlight the importance of its subject matter.
Yeah, you wanna do a little bit of wordsmithing there.
Nice.
I mean, this last question, last sentence, if he looks forward to feedback from RT is feasibility center. There's something missing there. Like I get it, but isn't that kind of true for everything?
Yeah, I almost think we deleted that last sentence because to me, it adds a little bit of confusion of what we meant by the first.
Go ahead and delete this entire sentence.
Yes.
Oops.
Where are you at? Not,
Yeah, let me,
there we go.
shoot.
Sorry, this call ended.
Oh, somebody's trying to.
This somebody here did.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to scroll with this big picture.
I think somebody's just making a Teams call. It's unrelated to the meeting.
Yeah, but
Where is it?
it's all right. So I've deleted, I'm just trying, for some reason I can't quite get this to. Okay, so I've done it, but I can't. Oops.
Oh, you're fine.
Oh, you know what?
No, you're
No,
not.
we just lost internet.
See, that's.
Oh.
Is that what
Oh, that's what that.
But,
I really hope it didn't delete all of that.
It's like.
Oh.
It sounds like.
you know what? It's just this computer, because I still have internet.
Still. Well, but that computer must have it, because it's on the Teams call.
Yeah, the Teams call is on.
Oh, bring up the document.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
but somehow this, oh, okay, so
This
but
one has.
it just came back on. So let's see if it,
Yeah, so you just have to share it.
Stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
Okay, so is there a way to get her computer? Maybe we need to call her, she said.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You want to share again? Let's see if we can find it. I mean, I use Teams all the time. Keep going down.
I can't.
Is there anything underneath there?
Now,
Just those.
so the problem is, It's on her computer, but this is a separate computer.
She just has it.
Oh, you know what? Maybe, let me try sharing from,
That's a different.
She just has.
let me try sharing. I think
Yeah, share from hers.
that's, I'm, yeah, but it doesn't look like she's. All right, we need to just, can you maybe? I'll try calling. Yeah, that'd be great. Learning experience.
She's not up on the Teams. Is that what you're saying on her computer?
Yeah, she's not in the Teams meeting.
If you just share the Teams invite with,
Is it, I think,
well,
yeah, maybe you just, no, that's not it.
No.
that's not it.
No.
It's a Word
Go
document.
down.
Maybe she was doubled up on the teams.
No.
That-
Wrong number, Adam.
Yes, that's.
You're calling here.
Other number.
So-
Phones in the room.
She might not have.
Yeah, that's great.
And I just ask her which ask her.
How do I pull up
Help.
help? So it's not there.
Five ideas. See how.
Oh, she ain't cool.
It's a laptop. I'll bring it to her.
That's straight like another guy.
Best line of the day.
Yeah. I could keep watching.
I think that's the dog
I
runner.
give it a 5.
But actual dog runner.
Consensus, Wendy, you need another cupcake?
Cupcakes.
I don't know, it's a lot.
I don't know.
When did you?
Julie,
Julie.
she's talking about.
Are you watching the cat walking along on the bridge?
Well, now it's over by the picnic tables across there. You can just kind of see it's like ears.
Just
Like
with like
white
minimize
cats.
this.
Is that,
See that?
you know, it's like an
And then
inbred cat or is it a stray that just is adopted? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
minimize that.
Yeah, we have like 3 around our.
Oh, no, it's not. There's stuff. Okay, I go to email.
I wouldn't bring somebody.
Well,
Well.
but I don't think it'll be there anyways.
We have 2 here, let me. Straight in front of you. And we, my colleague went on like, she's a mom and has all these like neighborhood chat. Now, like, did all this research on Facebook.
Yeah.
Found out there's like, I think. She says we need there. So like, I just bet it was. They were just like spinach. They ran.
Basically.
She's coming.
They do. People and
Were they being
And it started coming around and they started.
I feel like they're kind of aggressive.
Pretty soon.
They are kind of. I didn't find any other matter.
Right.
Yeah.
This cat. It's a muscular and at first I have. So scared. Because they had been living.
You think they're nuts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll leave there.
have some canisters
I'm
too.
gonna leave there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, I know.
Because I have no.
I was driving on the road.
She needs some.
Kid.
Yeah, we.
My brother.
Right.
Typically ask
Like
for,
this little turtle.
Yes.
Like months.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm driving down the road about a mile from our house. And again, my parents lived up on, Forest Land. And it's this little crossing.
It's a great. I've had.
I'm using to start.
Yeah.
It's over.
Like,
Hey, we're back.
All right, so, is there a way to make that bigger? Looks like down there at the bottom, you might be able to make it a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Or get rid of meeting chat.
Okay, yeah.
Chat.
Yeah, I think
I'm the kind of person.
there we go.
That's
All
helpful.
right, that's back where it was.
Okay, everybody, take a look at the language that's up there. Terry did a little bit of,
Just that last paragraph, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
that last little paragraph.
the AMC requests.
Okay, one little thing. Can we just put a period after date? Get rid of but in. Or, yeah, just get rid of the but and put capital I. Okay, yeah, question 3 even better.
Mhm. So.
Go ahead.
Do we wanna, there isn't anything in here clarifying maybe that question 1 and 2 are the priority? Other than saying that, you know, we wanna include it in the 2025 research agenda. We did take out the research agenda to begin with because we felt like they didn't need to know that. I don't even know if they know the date of that. We kind of then put it back in. Is it better just to say that we want it done? Like, when do we need the scoping proposal done in order for us to be able to include it in the research?
Well, the first time around, you needed probably mid-June, so you'd have a chance to read it.
I think personally, I like leaving it a little bit more vague than that instead of saying mid-June, because
Yeah.
even if they get it back to us in August, I would still rather have it in August than in October. You know what I'm saying? So I want, and there is some, we probably could still get it in the 2025 research agenda through some sort of like an amendment by the board, something like that. So I don't think we need to be all that specific with them on it, just that we are hoping that we can get it in time for the 2025.
No, I'm asking, do they know what that 2025 research agenda, does that mean?
I think that Emily's phrase that she did put in.
Oh, yeah, because you said ASAP at one point, so I mean, maybe that is a good way to do it.
And then I think to that question of does this represent a prioritization? To me, it represents prioritization.
I agree with that, yeah. Stacy?
Yeah, just there, one of the small changes I made in the very beginning letter actually adds that a comprehensive research agenda is for July 2025. So hopefully that.
Okay, great. It's in there.
And I would deputize Terry and Sean to, I see Sean, you have your hand up, so I would hope that you would carry that message forward to them. If they can make that July deadline, then all the more better. If they can't, then as soon as possible thereafter would be useful, and we would try to do what we can to get it included. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that so far our understanding of getting things in the 2025 research agenda meant we had to get them to you in May so you could consider them in June and so on. So I think I'm wondering if we could tweak the language a bit, maybe saying including it in the research agenda in 2025.
I'd be okay with that. Anybody have any heartburn with that?
And then Terry and I, of course, can communicate what's the intent there, but it's not necessarily that earlier deadline.
I think the rest of that paragraph here, to your point question there, Amanda, I think it does. To me, it's more clear than just saying these are the priority. This third one is a secondary priority to the first two. I think it's more clear the way it's written, and it clearly shows that priority, that prioritization timing. Okay. Where are we at with this? Let's see. By the finger tests, everybody.
Fingers.
I was like, it feels.
Jason, you just want to tell us where you're at as far as 5, 4, 3, 2, 1?
4.
I'm seeing 4s and 5s around the room. This is good. All right.
We needed that break in the little crash.
Okay. I think this paragraph, we're ready to move forward. So what else do we have in the rest of the?
Well, there's, I mean, in terms of the rest of the contextual information, it was not draft. My original, the understanding of the direction to me was to draft it for questions 1 and 2. And then Stacy and maybe somebody else added a little more into the contextual information, so it could address those third questions. And so I guess I don't think there's a whole lot, but it probably does need a little massaging.
So what would you suggest there then, Terry? We could try to find an hour outside of this meeting, to have Terry take this back, work on a final proposal, bring it back to the group. If we can find an hour where everybody can meet via Teams. And it might not take an hour, maybe it only takes 20 minutes to convene, see if anybody wants a period moved here or there, or a comma or something, and then take a vote.
Yeah, so I think what you're suggesting is I take a first crack at repackaging a little bit and adding so that those third questions are included. Send out, see if I get feedback, and then you folks.
I think we're really close.
Yeah,
I don't want to sideline us. I just want to recognize that this is a long document. There's a lot to it, and it would be nice to have it completely be cleaned up, right? With the version that Stacy put forward, like the first couple pages, delete the other ones.
Yeah.
The version that we just the wordsmith in terms of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then any other cleanup items that you think are, grammatical or whatever that would be useful, that bring that back as a full, and send it out to the committee, and then have a vote meeting.
Yeah.
Stacy and then Josh.
If that makes sense to me, I guess the last piece that I just have questions on was the very last section, the other information section, of 3, and I just wasn't really clear where those came from, and
Which part, more specific?
it's very page 7 or 8,
It's
like it's
B5.
the last,
B4, B5.
B5, other information. Yeah, those 3 bullets. I just wasn't totally clear on where those were coming from.
Yeah, I mean, since I was the primary drafting there, I took what was done in previous versions of this document and the other research questions, and tried to make them as relevant as possible to the amphibians. So.
Let's spend a little bit of time looking at that right now. But before we do, Josh, did you have another?
Yeah, as far as finding an hour, it's clear. Meeting in that context, we're talking about Terry doing cleanup on this. We're not talking about revisiting, changing language substantially, et cetera. That's what I think is not exactly
my thought.
the work we've done today, but with cleanup, so we have a final document. The other one, but not making substantive changes, right?
That would be my.
All right, just wanted to make sure we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, I would not want to reopen everything else and have it be
We've already hashed through a lot. Everybody's unhappy, boys. That means we're in a good spot. I don't like, be reopening this and that. I want
Amen.
Yeah, we've come to agreement today. I want to respect that. And just help.
Yep. That was my thought. Yeah.
Okay.
So with that in mind, is there, looking at this section, these 3 other Does anybody have any thoughts?
Do these things differ for amphibians, the way they do for roads? West and east and other classifications?
What they do as relates specifically to question 3.
Okay, okay, then that should be it.
So just to clarify, Terry, these were ones, other information from previous question packages you just recycled here.
I recycled and touched up to be as relevant as possible for amphibians.
Maybe that's all the context. I just didn't remember us guessing this or 3.
Yeah,
So I just.
yeah, no, you folks haven't gotten to this part yet.
Yeah, exactly. We had to scroll.
I think those make some sense.
And then within 2, actually we did discuss it. I think this Wendy had discussed the sentence in there. I believe there was some language that aims to provide information to allow overtime determination of the adequacy of amphibian protections in the context of the BGOs.
Yeah.
That was maybe like 2 conversations ago.
If there's no issues, then I'm good. I just, I wanted to raise it. I wasn't sure, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Amanda.
I know that number 3 was a big thing that I brought up at the last meeting. I really appreciate that being captured in the way that we did the questions, and then down here. The other, I guess, piece that, since I know it's ergo, but that I would like included would be something around like disease within the population, something around that. I don't know if there might be a different word that might be more inclusive, but those climate change, non-forest land uses, those are specific to kind of environmental impacts to the population, but there's other interspecies.
You mean like disease,
population dynamics.
amphibian diseases?
Yeah. I know that there's some diseases and fungal infections and things that are affecting amphibian populations
Maybe
that
put
have nothing to do with
or
what we're
something.
Well, we've got EG.
Yeah, just, that's like a full, kind of a classification that, all that to put there. I've seen some top sign stuff. Interests, crazy. Yeah, exactly. Would that be?
I mean, a fungal.
It's a fungal infection.
I think, yes, some people would probably classify it that way.
Yeah, it's a disease, just a
Yeah.
question of what's the pathogen.
Yeah.
Bacteria, protozoan, virus, that's all.
But just thinking about how, obviously, having adequate habitat is good, to increase populations, but there could be other.
Okay,
You folks want to take a date?
so why don't we look at dates and let's try to find a date. And I completely agree and want to underscore what Josh said. This is not, we're picking a time not to relitigate everything we just did, but rather a time to, Terry's going to take this back. He's going to refine and clean up the document, put it in a final format and send it out to us. We'll have some time to look at it. We're coming together in this meeting. If somebody wants to, ensure that a T is crossed or a I is dotted or a period here and there, that's probably okay, but we're not going to litigate that substance because I think we've pretty well had a good discussion about that here and appreciate where we've gotten. And that meeting will just be a final vote. We'll have to take public comment and all of that. It'll be an official meeting, but.
Just one other quick question. Given the conversation we had on question 3 and recognizing there's going to be this more of a back and forth, is that some kind of contextualizing some of that? Are you going to include that in your cleanup? Just thinking what section we might provide some direction on what section that might be.
Right.
Sorry, I missed.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Do that in the paragraph that we
Yeah, that's
answered.
right.
I guess I don't understand.
Yeah, which,
What additional-
Yeah, the additional context of like, we say in there, like, yes, we know that there's gonna be more conversation, but we don't say anything other than that, like, that we are gonna come back, all the conversation we had, that we wanna identify the specific rules and have a conversation with you about what that means, and, like, did you wanna provide any more of the context from our discussion in the packet? Because that would, us just telling them, this is gonna take more time,
I think
and it doesn't.
the last sentence does that.
Yeah, I just don't know if there was any other contextual information that we.
Well, I think certainly saying something about unless we want to try and do this before your vote meeting, which I'm saying no, I think it's warranted to say, the EMC will provide a list of rules, soon, or something to that. So put that in textual information is.
I'm just curious, I'm really curious more than anything, just because we had so much conversation that the EMC is, or that the IRSC is not gonna be privy to unless they go back and watch this.
well,
video.
before we have, honestly, if I think about how I would envision this unfolding, question 1 or 2, they're gonna move forward with the scoping proposal. We're gonna get that. It's gonna go on its own track. Question 3 is going to be some back and forth. I think that Stacy and I will add it to our agenda with the co-chairs of IRST. We'll talk to them about here's some of the places where we were hung up. We recognize that there's some nuance in how we each one of these questions, it needs to be a little bit more refined list of the activities that we're actually asking you to look at, the associated rules, and then some discussion probably with them to determine, would it make sense to have a conversation of some sort at our upcoming joint meeting where we discuss what's the best way to tackle some of these questions, or maybe not the best way. What are some ways to tackle these questions so that we can start thinking about, of those, what would be our priority? Like, how would you approach a question and look at the steep slopes rules, or would you want to break that out with the blobs and the gummies in 2 separate questions, or would you, anyway, I just think that having that back and forth with the co-chairs over there would help us figure out how we want to structure the conversation moving forward. I don't anticipate, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that this group is going to get back together unilaterally without any feedback or back and forth with IRST and hone those questions. I think it would be better for us to have some sort of a back and forth with them and then come back together with this group and start to tackle that with feedback. What does everybody else think?
I'm content that as it is, I think that we've got other avenues where we can fill in the gaps.
That's sort of my feeling too. Yeah, I feel like it's not like we're sending the one message and then we can't send another for 3 years. I think we captured it pretty well, and to the extent we need to have informal back and forth or chairs back and forth. I don't think we need to put more information in this particular paragraph.
Agreed. I think we could spin our wheels for a long time without really making a lot of progress if we don't do that. So I'm comfortable moving forward like this without an additional. Other people are.
Chair, I just wanted to ask how much time Terry and Emily might need to have the document ready.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that. What do you
Well,
think?
I think we can turn it around in terms of cleanup and massaging the contextual information because Wendy, Stacy already put in some great ideas, and Wendy as well, about here's, including question 3 in here, these need to be. So I think 48 hours, I can get that draft back to you folks.
Okay. So do we want to look at, next week is,
Well, I can get you a draft in 48 hours, and then you folks Can review.
Would
Can
need to
review,
review it.
how long do you need to review? Get back to me, I compile within 24 hours and get it back out.
What does Friday, the 25th look like for people? I just say that because I don't want to let it slip too far, but yeah, that
Yeah.
week I'm slammed until Friday.
It's not good for me.
Okay, about the week of the 28th.
Well, I guess, no, that's not true.
We can, I remember, we're only looking for an hour here.
Right.
Right.
We don't need a full 4 hour.
So for me, it's budget hearings Monday through Friday.
What time are those budget hearings?
We start at 9 in the morning, usually end by 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Long day.
8 o'clock?
8 o'clock would be fine with me. 18,
I
yeah.
love
I
early
can-
meetings.
Yeah.
We can do, we have an AMC co-chairs. Is that just us on the 18th? Terry, that's not,
18th would be great.
The 18th is just the two of you.
yeah, so we could do it that afternoon.
No, the
Maybe it's the
18th is
next
good.
week, all right. 18th is good.
I'll just be on the road.
Will you be able to?
I don't know. I mean, I have to go to Eldon at the Zodiac operator.
So should we just choose that time slot, take that time slot? We have it from 1 to 2. We have our co-chairs call. We could, does that work for people?
What time's late?
1 to 2 on Friday, the 18th? Yeah.
I can make that work.
Jason can make it work. I
Okay.
see a thumbs up from Dave. All right,
Cool.
looks like we found a time.
Thank you for not requiring me to do you.
Yeah, we all-
I'm very grateful.
Yeah. Which means I'm gonna conversion Stacy and set that meeting about
Yeah,
when we're gonna.
Yeah.
do this.
1 o'clock, did you say?
yeah, 1 o'clock. And I'm assuming Emily or Terry, you guys are gonna send out a
Yeah, yeah,
schedule for
yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's all Terry. I'm just here for editing now and support, so.
Okay, Friday, the 18th, 1 o'clock, 1 to 2 o'clock. And, you know, we can try to get out of there with the goal of trying to get out of there sooner than an hour. If folks can come prepared for that meeting, maybe we should just, you know, hold the public comment period. If there's no comment, we go right into the discussion and vote. And then we can just do our co-chairs call.
Oh, sure.
Mhm.
Works for you, Stacy?
All right.
Perfect. So given it's.
That was easy.
Yeah.
Given it's 3:05, I'm not sure how we best amount.
Let's go into the road stuff.
You need steep slopes.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Slope stuff. And Terry,
I like the photo.
Yeah, I agree. Epic.
So I think.
yeah,
Thank you. Triple crossing that.
Western Harbor.
Gotta hear stuff.
Yes, that story about a turtle.
well, and it was even more epic because it was west side, so it's like jungly vegetation.
Yeah. Yeah.
60-year-old forest.
I sent you.
We're in Loki tab now.
Okay.
For the-
Go back to the turtles.
I don't know when that turtle is long gone.
Probably. Sorry.
Yeah.
Stacy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought that it was super helpful. Thanks, Terry, for compiling everyone's answers and responses. And I think I was a little bit of the outlier on my interpretation, so I wanted just to check sort of with the group and if you all are aligned and I can get on board, you know, for the purposes that I think you all were thinking it was meeting, it was good. I was just reading the rules and interpreting IRST's role here is really a review of the methods and providing information to inform how they would do this research, not necessarily starting to do like a mini version of literature review. So I think this one, Carrie and I had some discussion offline. This one is particularly confusing because we basically told them what method to use. And so then I think they were sort of, you know, how do we, if we've already prescribed the method, how do we do a review of the methods? But I just wanted to acknowledge that because I think otherwise everyone was pretty much in agreement that it met the mark. And I just had a different understanding of, and maybe it's more relevant for the other research questions down the road, but I just think it's I would like to understand how, if I'm off base here and interpreting the rules and the intention, and just kick it off there.
Let me just also read what the rules say for a scoping proposal. It says a literature review that specifies the need for or the type of monitoring research, mission studies, other means of scientific inquiry necessary to answer the finalized research question. So it's you know, what review is supposed to say, what is the need for this research? Answer the question, and what types of methods or what types of big picture monitoring research studies or inquiry to answer. So that's just so everyone understands. Here's the language of the rules that can be interpreted. Those words can have different interpretations.
That's just that had a little bit, sorry. But my concern or my question is, you know, they provide some summaries or some little bit of analysis of the papers without. It just felt a little bit like cart before the horse, so that it potentially could bias our own interpretation, and maybe that's just the challenge that we'll face. But it was a little confusing.
So I'm trying to understand, I was looking for the document while you were saying it. And so that was part of my, can you, I'm looking through your comments now and trying to interpret what you're saying. Were you expecting IRST to do the literature review themselves?
No, I think I would take it even a step back, where the way, when I read the rules, IRST's role in the scoping proposal is to give us a review of the methods, not a review of the literature. But we are asking them,
You're right.
the ultimate outcome we have prescribed to them in this question is a literature review. So I think it was confusing because we weren't actually, like, we told them what to do, but really the intent of this stuff is they help us decide what to do. But we sort of, because it was prescribed in rules, so it may just be a really strange case. I mean, I think, you know, for the roads, for example, my hope is that the proposal that we get would outline the methods of doing different sets and trends, not that they would actually do any review of the
status
of hydrologic connectivity of roads. But maybe I'm just, I don't know.
Yeah, I got what I expected. I hadn't thought to interpret it that way.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I mean, I guess I wasn't expecting that of this one because this one is a literature review, and so I did know that they had done their own sort of literature review to see what was out there. So it didn't surprise me the way it was written up, and maybe that's why I didn't really think about it from that perspective. But I agree with you when it comes to like this amphibian stuff that we just did. I would expect that they'll come back with us with different methods, potential methods of how to answer question 1, question 2, and with different costs associated with those, which they kind of did.
Yeah, they did.
For this, because I loved the table. I thought the table was very helpful. You know, saying here's the different ways of literature review can be done, and there's the different potential costs and pluses and minuses of those. But so I would totally expect them to come back with what you're saying.
Yeah.
in
I
future.
think I'm less concerned with this one specifically because it is a little bit of a strange case, but I guess if we agree that the purpose for the scoping proposal is to focus on the methods and give us an estimate of costs and timeline and how much it would take and how we should really ask the question. I want that to be clear for future scoping proposals so that they're doing that and they're not necessarily doing a initial literature review of hydrologic connectivity of roads. That distinction makes sense. Maybe you need both, but
When I read.
they're not doing the research themselves.
Yeah, no, you're right. They shouldn't be doing the research themselves. When I read a lit review that specifies the need for, to me, that's saying, yeah, this research question, what's the need to do this research question, to address this research question? So a lit review sort of says, well, here's what we know based on the literature, and here's this gap. And to me, it's more than just methods that's coming from the lit review, is the way I read that.
Wendy,
I was thinking like in these initial three questions, sort of the need for it, we've already been told to do it. So maybe that language would be more relevant in terms of for future work.
Yeah.
And this one appropriately doesn't think that much about the need, but jumps right into what are the ways we could do this.
go ahead.
Yeah, I did not answer the question, so I'm sorry I did not provide formal feedback to you, Terry. But in my review, I mean, I agree with, I think what the consensus is that I didn't see something that I wasn't expecting. Because I don't think you can really do a literature review without reviewing the literature. So it makes sense that they have some kind of takeaways from what they saw. And I would expect, kind of like Terry said, to see some sort of a gap analysis of, you know, what do we know, what don't we know? But yeah, this one's a little bit odd because kind of instead of taking that and then creating a research methodology, it's kind of like, well, let's do some other additional deeper dive into what we've found. So I think maybe it's a little bit of a obvious. Yeah.
But you're right, I would not expect in the future, for example, on roads to come back and then here's the state of this connection. As we understand it right now. It's like that would be really nice.
Yeah.
And want them to use their time that way, yes. And, you know, we're all figuring out how long and what process they go through. And so that was just another hesitation or concern I had is like, not so much for this one, but moving forward with that line like clearer so they understand. And we all understand. They don't need to do a full initial analysis of roads.
Yep,
I think you're right. I think that's something that we
that's important feedback, yeah.
Because we don't need this for.
I agree, Terry. I think Stacy has a very valid point that it should be captured in our feedback to the IRSD, and that is that we wouldn't expect them to give us a state of the information. You know, for example, on the roads question, for each one of these questions we bring forward, like they don't need to tell us what we know about, you know, our question is, what's the distribution of the amphibians across? Their scoping proposal back to us shouldn't say, here's what we know about that. It should say, here's how you would gain that information, right? Or here's the methodology to go about. And maybe they say there is a lot of literature on this already. We would suggest one way to tackle this would be a review of the literature that's been done and including showing where these species exist across the state, and then saying we would recommend refining that with these methods over time or whatever. Right. So that's the sort of thing we would expect, not necessarily a verbose, like you have enough information. Here it is, you know what I mean? Right. So I think that's a good point.
One thing I would add to that list is maybe an assessment of in these areas, the research is fairly well fleshed out, we feel like they know, and these are areas where there is inadequate research.
Yeah.
That kind of gap analysis that you mentioned.
So, I think Emily's trying to capture. I'm not sure if you want to try to, if your responses are fit into the framework of the questions they have, if you want to try and do that today, or just sort of these high level points that you made, that you started to make. And I didn't quite understand the difference between, or I heard a difference. I thought what I heard from you saying, what I heard from you, Seth, was the gap analysis wasn't needed, but I'm not sure if
No. Stacy could probably say it better than I can. We don't necessarily need we don't need them doing their own gap analysis, right? I think that's what you're.
to justify.
We just want to know what what would be the appropriate methods to answer the question that we have, that we're putting forward. And if one version of that would be, there is a lot of literature on this already. One way to tackle this would be a literature review, and here's what the timing and cost would be. Then that's fine, right? Or maybe there is a lot, but there are some gaps. We would recommend a gap analysis in this area with a literature review and some sort of systematic evidence or whatever, right? So that would be a methodology that they could prescribe, but not that they do that themselves, right? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I think the part that gave me the discomfort in this context, which again, because it's a strange case, it's fine, but for future ones was where it was like content summary or content something where they were actually like summarizing the papers and not necessarily making recommendations, but that just gave me pause where that seemed like a step too far. And so I think what you just laid out, Seth and Julie, is like what they did, understanding what papers are out there, what's the information, what's the gap, where might be a really valid place for more research based on your question, and here's the strategies and methods to do it. But then if they started to move into, and we started to look at things and they started, they sound like this and we think we know this, and that just, I guess that's making sense, that attempt to sort of analyze or make some conclusions from those papers, that's what gave me a little pause as far as future scoping proposals, because that just felt like beyond, I don't know. You're doing me a face.
I apologize for the face, but as I read their abstracts, what I think you're responding to is their abstracts. As I read their abstracts, being not a person who's familiar with the roads and the connectivities and eastern slopes or amphibians at the level that you are, I read them saying that this was a type of research that might be appropriate, or this one we had concern about. And so you're right, they dug a little farther into it, but we asked them for just a literature research, and instead of just giving us a list of what was available, they've gone through and saying, this one didn't meet some of the criteria, we threw these out. Here's an abstract of those pieces. I found it helpful. I took it as an education piece for a layperson.
Let me ask you this, Terry.
That's my strange face, sorry.
In the rules themselves, I can't remember. Does it require that IRST themselves do a literature review, or is it?
Yeah, so there's a lit, as part of the scope of proposal, there's a lit review.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I've read. The lit review, that's justified. So there is.
So they do have to do at least a preliminary lit review.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is what they were.
And whether or not they went, I think the question that you're posing, Stacy, was, it felt like they went too far in answering the question with their lit review, rather than doing a lit review to say, here's where we need more information, And I think the challenge is that even talk about the methods of doing the lit review, which they provided several different methods for doing lit review. They wanted to sort of be able to say something about the completeness of the existing literature so that you folks would be informed. I mean, they also said this is not, we can't say this is 100% exhaustive, all the literature out there, but we looked pretty darn hard and there just wasn't much, which was expected by everyone, but they, on a preliminary pass, said, confirmed that.
Yeah.
And is that going too far or not? That's kind of the question.
I think for this one, it made sense.
Yeah, it was just, I think I found the section of the 2.5 insights and then that insights, it's like page 22 and 23. And again, I think it's okay in this context, but it just gave me pause for future. They're necessarily more complicated, but our questions are bigger and broader and we're not asking them for literature review. It struck me as a little bit not their intended purpose, I guess.
And also to clarify, and this leads into another topic, but there were several people who provided feedback saying, I would have liked to see a recommendation from them. And I know, and Sean, you might want to chime in more specifics, but I know they wrestled with, it's not our job to provide policy guidance. And at what point are we stepping across that line, providing too much, providing a recommendation that's based on science, even if it's on what the science methods should be. So they didn't provide a recommendation on that. And that was a little bit of a, they had some conversation around, we don't want to.
I actually appreciate that. And I did in my feedback say that I thought they got a bit too verbose. I thought the document was a little bit too big for the purpose that we need them. You know, honestly, I think the appendices are helpful. And if people want to dive in deep, that's great. But at the same time, I put most of the stock into the executive summary and the table that they put together, because that's, I think, what this committee actually needs to move forward with. And it's useful to have that additional information. But to the extent that it gets too, that it gets really long, and maybe that's kind of what you were saying in sort of the contextual information, they certainly can't do that on other types of questions where the literature is going to be far greater. And trying to complex is absolutely, and so it's not a good practice to get in and on trying to offer opinion on each piece of literature. And so maybe that's, a way to kind of say this was okay for this one, but certainly this is not expected and even, maybe in some ways not helpful moving forward. We would ask you to put most of your energy towards just summarizing and giving us the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like, just to reiterate what you said, the executive summary is sort of the most important thing. And I guess the follow-up question is, was that executive summary did it satisfy your hunger for what you were looking for?
I personally think it did.
Yeah.
But others.
Found it to cover, I guess this question, I found it to cover about 90% of what I felt like they needed to know.
Right, which is
the other 80 pages were great, but they covered the 20%.
Yeah, which from my perspective is what you want. I think an executive summary is never going to give you 100%, right? But if it gives you 90, 85, and then you go off and you find the pieces in that help you, then it's there. Amanda, you have your card up, sorry.
I think Wendy had that
Oh,
before me.
Wendy, I can't see Wendy's.
Oh, yes,
Go ahead.
way back there. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think following a little bit on what Bill said, I like having the insights on content. I mean, it's just like less than full page. To me, that was worth having it there. I feel as a non-scientist, it's helpful to have some context here that will help in the future when we revisit this. So I didn't mind having the, appendices at the end about specific papers and stuff like that. I would have liked to see a recommendation though, and to me, that's not really stepping over the policy science line. It's partly because it's about where do they think you get the most value in terms of what they can do for the amount of dollars available. So I would have liked to see a recommendation.
Amanda, and then.
I tend to agree with Wendy on the insights and I actually think this is my personal opinion, but I think that it'll be even more important when we get into some of the other topics because I could see the dollar amounts per different scoping proposal and the scope of work being vastly different and the different methodologies and it being really complicated. And so having some, and the appendices in the back are great in that, it's just the word for word abstract that's included in the publication. We could go and each of us could review that, or we could just have a one-page summary and recognize that this is somebody's interpretation, right? But it's a committee of diverse stakeholders' interpretation of that paper, right? And we can all read a paper and probably pull out a line and get something different out of it, right? And so that is what I worry about with if we just have the executive summary. That's like only having the abstract of a paper and not actually looking at the methodology and the results and just reading the abstract in the discussion. So, I mean, you kind of, for us to have a well-formed opinion going into a decision with, what to include in the research agenda, I do think we kind of need that other meeting tomatoes. Now, can the executive summary need to be improved? Probably. But I do think that having all that information for us that are more policy people, not science people, other than a handful in the room, it's helpful it is helpful for me. So I think it's a pretty critical piece. Now on the recommendation piece, I actually would argue and say that I don't think that we should have them give us a recommendation. I think that we should be operating from a first principles perspective, having all of the information like just described, reading kind of how they went about what they did, and then making our own determination based on what's included in the information. Because otherwise, the likelihood is that we're going to go with the recommendation and not have a more kind of diverse conversation about where we all landed. It is my just thought on that. It's just kind of is like a leading question than having the recommendation. It's not that I would like it. I would like to have a recommendation, but yeah, I don't think that I would be as honest with myself if I did. I probably would say.
I'm looking at the clock here, thinking about how are we gonna get through this and get to a final that everybody, that reflects all of our individual thoughts here. How are we gonna do this, guys? Because we got 30 minutes and I want to be respectful of people that have other appointments after 4 o'clock. Stacy.
I was just gonna say, I think generally agree, everyone liked the document, felt it was appropriate level of detail. The executive summary was really strong. So I guess, I don't know if we need to go question by question, but we could generally convey to IRSD that we liked the proposal. It met what we were hoping. I guess I would just ask that maybe there's also some discussion, maybe it's co-chair, or a line in this document that just raises that question or points back to the rules around, how IRST will be putting together future scoping proposals that where the method is not dictated by the question, and that, somehow capturing that piece, I guess, and I'm not doing a good job at summarizing it, but I think that would just be my only point of clarification or feedback is that, maybe it's a question to the IRSD or that we just want to better understand how they plan for future proposals where the method isn't prescribed, focusing on the gap analysis, the review of the methods. Does that make sense? Hold up.
Yes. Yeah. I think maybe a way to say what Wendy is saying and what Amanda is saying with regards to a recommendation would be, maybe, while we don't have consensus around giving a recommendation, give us your thoughts about how well these different methodologies that you're proposing to us would address the question, right? And what are some potential, which I think they did a little bit in this one, right? They did that. And I think that's useful because while it may not give us a full-on recommendation, it informs our discussion about where we choose. And then we get to kind of go recognizing where this one might be a little bit weaker, this one might be strong, but it's going to cost more. And we have to figure out a way to marry all of that up. That's our job, not theirs. And so I think if they just arm us with that information, that's their job. And that's really helpful.
And to piggyback on that, rule does say, if there's multiple proposals, IRC shall compare their costs versus knowledge benefits.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
knowledge benefits, you could flesh that out, I think is what you're starting to do. The knowledge benefits to us means, just a few points there.
You can have, yeah, exactly.
And I think that they probably did that by their interpretation.
Yeah.
If we want a
Say,
little
good
bit
job here.
more weight on the scale in that, then we can communicate that we'd like a little bit more weight on the scale.
And I think everybody, I've skimmed through, I think everybody said they like the tables, the summaries. Good on you there. Keep doing that sort of stuff because it's useful.
Thank you for taking the notes and getting this ready to go.
Tables and figures are helpful. Okay. Do we want to discuss at all the actual content? Because at some point that's part of the agenda, right? The research agenda that we have to put together. So they've now given us a scoping proposal with, I believe, 4 options, right?
But before you do that, is this paragraph that she's working on IFC said we'd like a response. It should be an AMPC cohesive response. Is this the one that says generally? That makes the most sense to me. Before you move on to that.
I think acknowledge that they did do that cost versus knowledge benefits in this one. Like say, we appreciate that was done here. It may be there will probably be more to that analysis with different questions, right? With that have a bunch of different potential methods to answer them.
I feel like that might be a little puzzling to IRST because we sort of say things may need to change, but not specifically how, to the extent we were just talking about them. So I wonder if there's another way to provide them with this information. Like say, what we were just talking about was clear, I think it sets the direction and then the general statements in there. Like may need to discuss how to approach future scope input. To me, it just feels a little bit general.
Yeah.
Maybe we should take some time to make it a little more specific and talk about it in our 1-hour meeting.
Well, there was quite a bit of diversity of opinion, or there was some diversity of opinion in what I received in writing. So, and I'm hearing a little bit of consensus on executive summary is great. Tables and figures are helpful. But beyond that, overall, it was a helpful document and met our needs well enough. And
good enough. Write it down.
Can we send that for the group and then can we share our individual responses as well?
Well, you can. The challenge there is then the IRC says, well, wait a minute. You could certainly acknowledge there is a range, the range of opinions were here, but if you're sharing everyone, then what's their direction? What are they trying to meet?
True. Yeah.
And so it's better to speak with one voice.
I agree.
Sorry, Seth.
Can we just be very concise and go back to the, just say, everyone thought the document was useful and helpful. The executive summary was done very well. We liked the figures and the tables. To do more of that in the future, continue that practice. So
You don't need something that's extensive for all lit reviews, right?
yeah,
We-
not
we're-
the lit review on this was a little bit extensive, understandably so, because that methodology was prescribed. In the future, we would not expect the lit review to have IRST opinion on each one of the cited articles, right?
Well, I think just to chime in really quick on that, with some of the other topics, you know, this one I mean, the requirement was for a lit review because we knew that there's not that much literature. Like there could be a lot of literature.
Yes.
Future topics too, so they're not even gonna be able to opine on every single one, but
Right.
it is, but I will say, for me, it is helpful to have those buckets of, you know, information of like you said, kind of the gap analysis stuff. So not on every single one, but having a general understanding of like,
Well, and that could be part of the questions in the future, right? We could have that as a question. What do we know? You know, the question this body could put forward is, what do we know about X, Y, and Z?
but in some ways, isn't that what a lit review
So that's what I'm saying.
say? Or they already have to do it, so we have to specify that when they're already supposed to be doing lit review. We need to, I guess maybe we need to provide, I mean, I guess that'd be a question for everybody, is do we need to provide more clarity around what we expect when we get their lit review? Because they want to make sure that they're meeting our needs.
Yeah.
I mean, and if we all have a different idea of what that's supposed to be, then probably need to get consensus around it.
Or you recognize that. I think where you were headed was, there's a bunch of different opinion on some of the details, but when you boil down into the executive summary, that worked. And I mean, that's another option.
I just think of where I wrote, right?
Looks like Sean also has something to say.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead, John.
We can't hear you, Sean. You can't hear us. Dang. You want to put your question in the chat box or comment?
It looks like it's frozen.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I was just saying this, I think there's some really great feedback here. And are you planning on including, there was like 3 paragraphs there I saw?
Just general.
Yeah, no, that
Because-
was just,
I thought those each had some really useful information. Like, you know, Stacy's comment on focusing on the methods, not doing the research. That's something that I think all our members realize, but it's hard to not kind of bleed over into answering the questions or trying to answer the questions, especially with that literature review one. But I think so that's really good feedback. And you know, don't be too verbose, provide good summaries. Again, that's something that goes against a fair amount of research and scientific training where you're supposed to be very thorough. So I think that's a good message to emphasize. And then that third
Yeah,
one, I think you're
agree.
talking about
Actually,
is giving some pros and cons of each one, but not going into a full recommendation, if that's what you folks mean, because that's something they were wrestling with. So that would be great to have kind of your feedback on that.
Yeah,
so APC would like to see pros and cons.
yeah, I mean, sort of, and that speaks to the, oh, she had it written there down below, but the, let's say, cost versus knowledge benefits. I mean, that's kind of where I see knowledge benefits. It's not, I mean, you could call that a pros and cons, right? So your cost, this one is less money, but you know, you also won't get this level of rigor. This one's gonna cost more, but you'll also get this, but the, you know, you design it this other way. It's a totally different cost. And you get these other things, but you're not gonna get that one. And they did that in this one.
It's a-
Let's say. One, they were abstracts. I think were actually abstracts that were from the books. They were not, so there's no actual individual comments made about specific reports. There were, so in your statement there about, do not expect feedback on individual articles, there really wasn't. They were the abstracts. But there was 10-item insights that was both.
That's right. That's fine.
Let me finish. It was in both summary as well as in section 2.5, they led into it and discussed what they're going to present, and then they presented those summaries again, the exact same word for word insights. And so just know that they were in both places. And I for one found the insight of their reviewing those articles to be at a high enough level that I thought it was for me beneficial.
Yeah. So you should take out that sentence in the middle in the future. That's not actually.
Okay.
Fair. Well, here's what I would propose that we do with the remainder of our time here, the 15 minutes, 16 minutes. I think, well, we're going to talk about the substance of this in preparation for our research agenda discussion. So I think we can kind of keep our powder dry there. People can have more time to think about where they think the right landing spot is in those four ways of tackling this. We could, so what I would suggest is that we spend the next 15 minutes or 10 minutes and then have the meeting clean up and that sort of thing. On the, if we could get to the charter and get that one knocked out. I don't think that, hopefully that will take a long time. Can we tackle that in 12 minutes?
We try. I think so.
Randy?
I was thinking we're providing the update on the attendance monitoring might be a very quick thing that you can do in 2 minutes, because we had a meeting talking about that last night. Sometimes that could be short.
Okay.
And you know,
Okay. Well, we'll see. And the charter, if we don't get to the charter until next meeting,
Yeah, I'd like to.
I was just trying to knock it out. So we don't, so let's go back to this monitoring. Here where you guys are at.
Okay, yeah, we had a brief meeting to refresh the memories last week. But basically where we're at is surely our responsibility to design effectiveness monitoring, say what, rules need to be examined or, what environmental effects or population trends need to be examined to meet the biological goals and objectives. So one of the things that kind of right away is that we don't have the draft HCP that's generally available. So we can't see, we have the draft BGOs, but we kind of need to know the context and so on. But given that, we've also reviewed, what are some other effectiveness monitoring plans, that are similar in nature and how do they work? So we've got, a long running example to the north of us in Washington State. We've got, other options. So we did look through those. So, well, in brief, what we proposed to do was to send IRST a letter from the AMC that was basically along the lines of, hey, we're starting to work on this. We've got a couple things we're waiting on to really dig into it. But in the meantime, are there things that you would recommend? Here's what we're looking at. What recommendations do you have? you know, that we should look at as well. And just really asking the IRST for recommendations. And that's, I think, about where we're at. There's gonna be, you know, future workload for the IRST and for us, you know, obviously, but we want to know what, you know, we reviewed other things. We know we need to look at specific rule sets, and then, you know, that's going to be water quality, and that's going to be, you know, structural, stream structure, habitat structure, and then it's also going to be, you know, status and trends of the critters themselves. But, you know, you can look at other plans as there are considerations here. I think we can hit Jack. That's really where we're at. So I think we're planning on doing a brief meeting before the next fall MC meeting to make a couple of additions and do a little honing of the draft letter. And then I think the next step would be to shop that draft around the MC and say, hey, you know, are we all good with sending this to the IRS to replacing request being, you know, what do you think we should pay attention to here?
Josh, for clarity, are you saying
Yeah.
at the June meeting, you'd like to?
I think so. Yeah, I think from the effectiveness monitoring, we were, you know, saying, well, we had a couple ideas that we wanted to incorporate into the letter, but into the draft letter, but for the draft letter to be reviewed by the whole MC. Did I capture that, Wendy?
Yeah, I do. What do you think? I think.
So, it's you, Josh, Wendy, who else is on that?
Julie, Dave, Bugman,
Julie.
myself.
Okay. Okay. Just trying to remember who was on that work group.
Yeah. I had a moment trying to remember who was on that work. It had been a bit.
Very senior moment today.
Thank you. Apologies from faculty, so HEP is that, you know.
Yeah.
I won't apologize. It's not our fault. I blame others.
Hey, it's nothing wrong. Oh,
No, it's probably their
yeah,
fault.
yeah, it's not their fault. Thank you. It feels like such an important part of that. I appreciate you continuing to like think forward on it.
I think there's also discussion about the differences between research and monitoring, but that's sort of like a.
Yeah, and that's something I mean, eventually we need to wrestle with this a little bit, but I do think there's, you know, there's the monitoring and then there's sort of effectiveness. And I think the effectiveness monitoring could include both of those, but they're different, right? One of them, and I think I brought this up before in this group, but I want to be very clear that in my mind and in our discussions, sort of our author group, my side of the author group, we've had a lot of discussions about the monitoring that we need to get off the ground. And it's not necessarily, it is effectiveness monitoring, but it's more monitoring than it is anything else. And that is looking at, you know, large wood, looking at starting now and have, you know, sites that are actually identified and monitor those sites over time to see what are we accomplishing. Temperature could be some of that, turbidity could be there. I mean, there's a number of things, and it's not necessarily before or after sort of design studies. It's more monitoring the streams that are, you know, some of the segment of streams that are affected by these rules to see what kind of changes we see over time. And certainly effectiveness of the rules is encapsulated in that, but it's not the same thing as doing a 3-year study where you go and harvest and then see what happens, right? It's more of a long-term across the landscape approach. And I think both are probably, well, no, not probably, both are important methods that need to be employed, but they're different. And so I think that at some point we need to figure out how we need to, you know, which sets of parameters fall more towards one or the other, or both, even if we start here and we also do that one in the future or whatever, right?
No, I agree. I mean, there's a certain amount of, do we want, you know, to be designing that something type study like Ripstream to test things, or do we want to be having what, the view of what's going on in the landscape. And again, we can divide that survey, so it does give us information on whether or not there's an unfortunate rules effect. But we don't have to necessarily go the Lockheed's research study back for every question, every part. Okay.
Yeah, there's like the Northwest Forest Plan monitoring that's done, and there's the ODF and W stream monitoring that's done. They're more of that sort of monitoring approach long term to see how we have to change what we're doing.
Well, and to be clear, it's not just, so to make it effective, there's a target or a number, that's based upon the biological goals and objectives to have persistence of species. And we're not getting there, if we're not getting there or we haven't met that target, then it implies that there is a lack of effectiveness, right? So it's not just monitoring. The way that you get to effectiveness monitoring is probably.
Well, and some lend themselves more to that than others.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And sometimes that goal might be.
Just the trend.
Yes, exactly.
Rather
That's
than
what,
a
that's what I'm saying.
And that's what,
benchmark, yeah.
that's what we
Yeah.
have in the most recent version of the PCF.
That's what I'm saying. Some of those trends lend themselves more toward trend monitoring than before after designs, right?
Yeah.
And even some of those that can be done under before after can also be really well informed by trend monitoring.
Well, you may be able to use those same sites for before and after. There's some. Yep. Thing that happens.
Yeah. We'll get you the. CPS thing as we can.
I guess I was curious, we had talked about it before and pushed it back, but, having Jennifer from ODF come and speak to AMC, maybe that's later in the summer or fall, and also sort of, maybe this is something to raise in the joint meeting with IRSP. I guess I really hope that they will be able to have capacity to help tackle this as well. I don't think it's, I think you'd said this before, it's an adaptive management program task. It's not, it's between both of the committees, I think, and certainly want to use their expertise. So I guess just thoughts about, that seems like a right topic for a joint meeting. And is there value, given that we're not going to know the status of the HCP for a while, having Jennifer come to one of our meetings coming up and giving an update, or
It may be even worth, I think it's a good idea, and it may be even worth having an individual, like a small group conversation with effectiveness strategy, monitoring strategy folks with Jennifer here. Because the larger one will be a problem.
yeah, definitely lots of groups thinking about this, and then the HCP as well. So how do we try to make progress? And I appreciate all the work that the work group's been doing. Do that in the absence of more information.
I think the letter's a good idea. So let's see what you guys want to continue to work on that letter. We can bring it back here. It kicks the ball a little bit further down the field and gets the creative juices flowing on their side. So, and whatever comes out the other side of the BGOs, I'm sure we can, that will still be a helpful exercise.
I don't want to confuse things, so I'll say that up the front, but on state lands, they have their own HCP, they go through their own process, but as part of that, there was, I think, a stewardship agreement that was signed that basically said, ODF protected lands are privy to the Forest Practice Act, but some things didn't cross over because of the increased protections that they have in their HCP for streams, and they're not exactly the same, but and they have long-term monitoring required for that HCP. And I don't know if there's any overlap or any cost-saving measures or anything that if they are already thinking about effectiveness monitoring. I'm just thinking if there's any agency, staff, capacity, lessons learned, anything that is,
simpatico, or if it's just totally, we just need to keep everything separate because it's totally different agencies. Think about agency and staff.
Yeah, so they're actually gonna contract with us to do, some of that, habitat monitoring and, we have for almost 30 years now, we've been doing, a spatially balanced random design across all, ownership types in Western Oregon. So, I mean, I shouldn't say Western, coastal, and Lower Columbia. So we have sites that have almost 30 years history. We also have a rotating panel design. So, there's some sites we go to every year that are really good for looking at trend. But we mix it up a little bit so we can get to more sites by having them rotate on longer time intervals. So, the advantage there is that we can have sites that already have a long history and that, aren't limited to private lands, right? Because we've got that history across all of the ownership types. We've got them in state forest, we've got them in, whatever, federal, whatever. So it might be something to think about just to make consistency, make them be able to borrow from each other in our efforts. Make it more efficient.
Yep, well, good. Food for thought, for sure. Yeah, let's, so we're at time. We will kick the, so did we get what we need for the feedback to IRST? What I last saw out there looked fine. Anybody had any, we didn't do any sort of final temperature check. We do want to get that to them rather quickly, right? So, everybody fine with that paragraph right there?
I just would suggest that when we say proposal need to be different since the methods are not specified, make that a little closer to what Stacy said, which I think, so I find that a puzzling sentence. Like you would say something like, we would expect future ones to focus more on what methods ought to be used in the research. If that seems consistent with what others think.
I think this was about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So say what?
Okay.
Future.
So it was just since the methods, like, I think this was about how the scoping proposal was done as literature review was specified. But I can get rid of that if we want, because this is for me,
I think you should just.
yeah.
You could delete that. Is everybody okay with this?
Can you, it's hard to read, but it's.
Can you?
Yeah, just 1 minute, I'm sorry. Here, 1 second, I'm sorry, it's whenever I touch it, it's because there's a comment.
Right.
Yeah, I just gotta get rid of one thing and then I'll go back.
Yeah, I find that clear about the research methods.
I'm good with it. If I see any opposition? Going once, twice, good. Forward that on too. Thanks, everybody. I apologize for not being the perfect. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Bye.